I mean, I'd rather live with Mom than with you. It was a quiet Friday night, just as the clock struck midnight. My husband, James, was engrossed in an online game in the living room while I was sitting at the dining table, working on some tasks I'd brought home. When James casually mentioned living separately, as if he were discussing the weather, I was stunned. Why? I asked, needing to understand his reasoning, especially since our marriage had been struggling lately. My name is Madison, I reminded myself. It was midnight on my 35th birthday, and I was in the middle of fertility treatments. James's sudden announcement felt like a bombshell, a cruel, unexpected birthday gift that left me completely speechless. Without taking his eyes off the game, James said, "You're 35 now, right? Even if you do get pregnant, it would be a high-risk pregnancy. I've given up on having kids with you. That's why I'm moving in with my mom." What? That doesn't make any sense. I shot back, baffled by the disconnect between giving up on children and his decision to live with his mother. James and I had gotten married the year before last. We initially planned to enjoy some time as newlyweds, but James was eager to start a family. As the youngest of 3 brothers, with each of his older brothers already married and having 3 kids each, James was often told by them that it's best to have children while you're young and energetic. Encouraged by this advice, we laughed it off and enthusiastically tried to start our own family, but a year passed without any success. At one point, James snapped, "You need to get this checked out." "Check what?" I asked, confused. "Find out why we're not having kids. There must be something wrong with you," he shouted. I was infuriated by his assumption, but I still went to see a gynecologist, just to be sure. To my dismay, the test revealed that I indeed had issues making conception difficult. The diagnosis was a shock. I had no symptoms and it was completely unexpected. Dr. Thompson explained, "It's challenging, but not impossible for you to conceive naturally." However, sharing this news with James felt overwhelming. That evening, I tried to explain the situation calmly over dinner. James's reaction was triumphant, as if he had been proven right. "I knew it was you," he said with a smug tone. "But I can still get pregnant," I stammered, trying to defend myself. James glared at me with a cold expression. "No, it hasn't happened yet, so it's not going to," he declared, jumping to conclusions. I felt my anger rise. "For all we know, you could be the one with the problem," I retorted, raising my voice. James shouted back, "Madison, the results are clear, yet you still try to blame me. Unbelievable." In a fit of rage, he slammed his hands on the table, causing me to flinch. "You're just a failure who can't have kids," he spat before storming off to the bedroom. James's harsh words left me in tears as I cleaned up the dishes alone. I told myself that he was just shocked and lashed out in the heat of the moment. If we could just have the child, I believed we could be a happy couple again. Determined to win back his heart, I started going to the gynecologist regularly and learning more about our situation. My anxiety grew, and even on the days most likely for conception, we had no success. I became obsessed with the idea of getting pregnant. One morning, I cautiously suggested, "Let's try tonight, please." He responded with disdain, "Isn't it embarrassing to bring up such a topic first thing in the morning?" I blushed, feeling awkward. Though it felt uncomfortable, such discussions should be natural between spouses. Trying to keep my tone gentle, I continued, "You want children too, right?" But James coldly replied, "Honestly, I don't even want kids. They're too expensive. I only considered it because my brother said a man isn't truly an adult until he has a wife and kids. But now, with this excuse from you, I couldn't care less." From then on, whenever I tried to initiate anything, James would refuse, claiming he was too busy or too tired. I was also exhausted from work, and the repeated rejections were a blow to my pride. Lately, James had become absorbed in online gaming, staying up late into the night. As a result, we hardly talked, let alone had any intimacy. It felt like James had lost interest not only in having children but in me as well. Despite everything, I continued to visit the gynecologist. I was taken aback by the sheer number of couples at the fertility clinic. The place was always bustling, and even with an appointment, a 2 to 3 hour wait was common. It was somewhat comforting to see so many couples facing the same struggles, all doing their best. Occasionally, I'd see couples leaving the doctor's office with tears of joy streaming down their faces. The wives, with still flat bellies, would gently touch their stomachs while their husbands walked closely beside them. I envied them deeply. I wanted a child too, hoping it would restore James's love and bring me happiness. I clung to the fragile hope that having a child would mend things, but I hit a roadblock when I learned that advancing to further treatments would require James to undergo tests. It might now be impossible. The walk back from the clinic always left me feeling desolate and on the verge of tears. As I stepped onto the main street, I noticed an elderly woman in flamboyant attire catching my eye. Her thick makeup and brightly colored dress were almost overwhelming. Though I couldn't recall knowing anyone like her, she had an oddly familiar presence that momentarily distracted me from my tears. Could that be my mother-in-law? I wondered, staring in disbelief. Even though we live in the same city, we rarely cross paths, so she looked completely different from what I remembered. But the distinctive mole on her cheek was unmistakable. My mother-in-law was supposed to be a modestly dressed, typical grandmother, so her radical change in appearance was shocking. I quickly blended into the crowd, trying to avoid her notice. The truth is, my mother-in-law is quite a character, indulgent with herself yet harshly critical of others. She's notorious for hurling insults that most would find shocking. She showers her youngest son, James, with favoritism, treating her other children merely as financial resources. Even her other sons detest her. When my father-in-law was dying of cancer last year, there was talk of her moving in with one of her sons, but both the eldest and the second son firmly refused. We expected the request might come our way, but she announced she would live alone while she was still healthy, possibly out of spite or simply due to her nature. After my father-in-law's passing, she made a scene, accusing everyone of being ungrateful for stealing an old woman's retirement money and took all his inheritance without sharing it. Despite attempts by my brothers-in-law and James to divide it legally, she refused to budge, and no one could prevail against her. She told me, "I have no interest in getting along with you, so don't come to my house," she said. Despite her usual clashes with my sisters-in-law, this interaction was relatively peaceful. She didn't notice me that day and soon disappeared into a store. Her presence in that shop was so unlike the mother-in-law, I knew that I found myself staring at the store's sign in disbelief. That night, I considered telling James about his mother's unusual behavior, but decided against it. She was an adult, and with my father-in-law gone, she was on her own. It wasn't my place to comment on her personal choices. After that, I saw her a few more times but chose to ignore it. Months went by, and as my birthday approached, James brought up the idea of moving out. I asked him, "Is there someone else you're interested in?" I wondered if his talk about his mother was just an excuse and if he was planning to remarry. But given that he spent most of his days gaming at home, it didn't seem like he was seeing anyone. I almost laughed at my own cold reasoning. James replied, "Well, there's a girl in my gaming group I kind of like, but it's just online. For all I know, she could be a guy pretending to be a girl." His response only made the situation seem more absurd. If he could make rational judgments about his online interests, why was he suddenly talking about moving out? It made no sense to me. James simply repeated, "I just want to live with my mom more than I want to live with you." I couldn't understand why James would prefer living with his mother instead of staying with me. "So, have you come to dislike me and lost your love for me?" I asked, my heart itching just to voice the question. It felt as though he no longer needed me, a wife who couldn't bear children. I braced myself for his response, trying to hold back my sadness. "Not really." "What?" James's nonchalant reply caught me off guard. "Like I said before, I don't care about having kids anymore. What we need is a different financial strategy." "Financial strategy?" I repeated, puzzled by his unexpected words. James nodded with a calm demeanor. "Yeah, it's about my mom's inheritance," he said, his tone serious. I was confused, struggling to see the connection. My brothers are greedy. They'll use any excuse, like having more kids, to claim a larger share of mom's inheritance. I won't let that happen. I was stunned by his blatant admission but kept my thoughts to myself. "But your mother is in great health. Isn't it premature to be discussing inheritance?" "That's exactly the point. She dislikes you but favors me. Living with her now could give me an advantage in the inheritance. Plus, there's a substantial fortune my dad left her. We could live comfortably without working hard. We don't have children to look after us in our old age, so we'll need the money," James explained with a dismissive tone, but I was horrified by the implications. "So, you wanted children because you needed them to care for you in your old age. And now that's not an option. You're aiming for a bigger share of your mother's inheritance." I hoped my assumption was wrong as I sought confirmation from James, but his response confirmed my worst fears. "Exactly. Children are supposed to look after their parents. By living with my mom now, I might even secure the entire inheritance, James said, showing his strong allegiance to his mother and lack of intention to be fair. I remained silent, feeling the depth of his familial ties. James continued, "When mom passes away, I'll move back in with you. You may not be able to have kids, but you're good at housework and bringing a decent salary. You're useful as a housekeeper." "Understood. Let's get a divorce," I blurted out, my frustration overriding James's words. Who would agree to such terms? To live separately and then reunite later was an insult. I knew James, the pampered youngest son, had his flaws, but this selfish scheme was beyond forgiveness. I realized that staying with him would never bring me happiness, and at that moment, my love for James completely vanished. "Let's get a lawyer to divide our assets and finalize the divorce." Divorce? I never mentioned anything about divorcing. Just living separately is fine. Hiring a lawyer seems excessive, James said, suddenly flustered but seeming to reconsider. "No, you'll be better off as a single man too. I won't be satisfied unless everything is divided fairly and legally. Plus, having a third party involved will prevent any lingering issues, right?" James smirked. "Maybe you're right. If I get a large portion of mom's inheritance, I'll be set for the future and can remarry. Just don't regret this." "Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Make sure you have no regrets," I replied. The next day, I contacted a lawyer recommended by a divorced friend and arranged a consultation. I also informed the landlord that only James would be moving out and organized a moving company. While making these arrangements, I overheard James on the phone with his mother saying, "I want to live with you and take care of you." I was astonished that he had proposed moving out before even discussing it with her. According to James, his mother was excited about the arrangement and had a few requests. As a result, the divorce preparations proceeded surprisingly smoothly. Originally, the assets were to be split evenly, but my skilled lawyer negotiated a better deal for me, securing 70% of the assets, including compensation. Given James's selfish reasons for our divorce, I decided not to hold back and claimed what I was entitled to. 3 days after our divorce was finalized, James returned to his family home. I was relaxing in my apartment when my phone rang. It was James and his voice was frantic. "Help me please, let's get married again. There's no inheritance. Mom spent it all on strippers. She's broke and deep in debt, and even the house is mortgaged." "Well, that's unfortunate. Your mom was really into those strip clubs," I said, struggling to suppress a chuckle. Just days earlier, I had seen my former mother-in-law heading into a strip club. Curious, I had checked the price list and was shocked by the figures. She had been frequenting the place for some time, clearly spending a fortune. With James becoming obsessed with online gaming and neglecting visits, she had fallen for a stripper and squandered not only my father-in-law's inheritance but also her own retirement savings, accumulating significant debt in the process. "Why didn't you tell me if you knew?" James demanded. "I don't criticize personal hobbies. I never stopped you from gaming, did I?" I shot back. James hesitated, then tried to shift the topic. "She's asking me to take out loans in my name, but that's not feasible. Could you give me the money from our property division? If we get back together, it's both of our money, right?" "Absolutely not." "Why not? You still care about me, don't you? Your husband is in trouble here." "I did love you when we were married, but when you suggested moving out, any affection I have for you vanished completely, especially now when it's clear you're only after money. There's no chance we're getting back together." "But my mom's demanding that I give her all my salary. She says it's only natural for children to support their parents. She was always so kind to me alone." James whined pathetically, but his and his mother's entitlement, that they should come first and everyone else should cater to them, was something I had no desire to support. "We're divorced now. We're strangers. Your family's problems are yours to deal with," I replied firmly before hanging up and blocking his number. I called my former sisters-in-law next. Although it had only been 3 days since the divorce, the urgency of the situation made it clear that waiting wasn't an option. I filled them in on the recent developments about my former mother-in-law and the details of the divorce. They expressed their sympathy and promised to deal with James. Soon after, my former brothers-in-law stormed into the family home, creating quite a scene. I heard about the commotion from one of my former sisters-in-law. After James' call, I decided to change the locks on my apartment for safety and made up my mind to move out. It felt like a complete break from the past. While searching for a new place, I discovered that the family home was up for sale. Though I could have inquired about James and his mother, I chose to focus on moving forward. I was ready to leave the past behind and start fresh. I'm now considering a pet-friendly apartment where I can enjoy a leisurely life with a cute cat.
The inheritance was all mine. Father would be happier if his son inherited everything rather than some woman who isn't even related by blood. You're not my sister anymore, I'm cutting ties with you, my brother declared with a sneering smile. Indeed, to our father, I wasn't related by blood. I was my mother's child from a previous relationship. Still, he had loved me as his own daughter, which made him very special to me. I was furious that my brother wanted to monopolize everything our father left behind, but his words about cutting ties with me brought a sense of relief. Fine by me, once you inherit, don't ever contact me again, I replied. Like I'd ever do that, and don't expect a single penny from me later, he shot back. I'm Kelly, a 29-year-old civil servant. My brother, Steve, is 22 and just graduated from university. He often brags about his prestigious job at a well-known company, always looking down on the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? I've got the blood of a father who worked for a major corporation, he'd boast, smugly emphasizing the bloodline he shares with our father. Steve and I share the same mother but have different fathers. Steve is the biological son of our father, while I am my mother's child from her previous marriage. Though I was technically a stepchild, Dad never treated me differently. He loved and cared for me deeply, which is why I regard him as my true father. My biological father, on the other hand, left us when I was little, running off with his mistress. I barely remember him. When Steve was younger, he didn't care about our different fathers, but everything changed after our mother passed away in a tragic car accident when I was an adult and Steve was still in middle school. Grieving and unable to cope, Steve started blaming me. At the funeral, he screamed, "Why did Mom have to die? It should have been you. No one would care if the step-sibling was gone." His cruel words shocked me, but I stayed silent as our father, angrier than I'd ever seen him, scolded Steve harshly. That day, any affection I had for my brother faded. Over the years, our relationship deteriorated. Steve seemed obsessed with outshining me academically, but his ambitions always backfired. He failed to get into his first-choice schools for both high school and university. As a student, he couldn't out-earn me, a full-time employee, and he avoided sports or arts to escape potential failure. Instead, Steve focused on asserting his higher status as Dad's biological son. He taunted me endlessly, saying, "I'm Dad's real child, you're just an outsider." Initially, I believed his behavior stemmed from misplaced grief, but as he grew older, his words carried genuine malice. Exhausted by his provocations, I started avoiding him altogether. When Steve decided to live at home during university, I moved out to my own apartment. I even coordinated visits with Dad to ensure I wouldn't run into him. 4 years later, Steve graduated and landed a job at a reputable company. I had prepared a tie as a graduation gift but decided against giving it to him when he greeted me with his usual smugness. "Of course, I got a better job than you. I've got Dad's genes," he said, clearly unchanged by his time at university. I continued living independently, working as a civil servant, while Steve lived with Dad and navigated the struggles of a new working adult. Unfortunately, this phase didn't last long. Less than a year later, Dad fell gravely ill and passed away suddenly, leaving me no time to say goodbye. At the funeral, I took on the responsibilities of the chief mourner. Thanks to Dad's meticulous planning, most of the arrangements were straightforward, except for the inheritance. The only inheritors were Steve and me, and I knew the discussion would lead to conflict. As expected, Steve showed up late to our meeting without so much as an apology and immediately said, "The inheritance? I'm the real child, so it's all mine. You're just a stepchild, an outsider. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim anything?" Tired of his arrogance, I offered a deal. "I won't inherit anything. In return, you must promise never to contact me for the rest of your life." "Deal, like I'd ever contact you. Just disappear," he said, sneering. Disgusted, I left the meeting. The next day, I visited a lawyer to formalize my renunciation of the inheritance. "Kelly, as a stepchild, you technically don't have inheritance rights," the lawyer started. "Actually, Dad adopted me legally," I interrupted, "but I don't want anything. I'm giving it all up." Dad had officially adopted me after marrying my mother, which meant I had full inheritance rights. But I wanted nothing to do with the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. I simply wanted to cut ties and move on. A month later, the The family court finalized my renunciation. I was finally free from the burdens of my brother and the toxic family dynamic. I contacted Steve. Hello, my renunciation of the inheritance is complete, I began. You know, from the estate investigation, Dad had. Shut up, Steve cut me off angrily. I get it, you've renounced the inheritance. Stop acting like you're my real sister, and don't ever contact me again. He hung up before I could say another word. I sighed deeply, knowing Steve. It was only a matter of time before he came crying back for help. That thought made me feel even worse. 3 months later, the calls and emails started coming in, numerous and persistent. I reluctantly answered one of his calls, hearing his exhausted voice on the other end. You know what? I need to borrow some money, he said. Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the repayments. I used Dad's savings too, but it's still not enough. What? Sure, Dad had some loans to repay, but if you've used all his savings for it, how is it still this bad? I asked, confused. Steve immediately snapped. Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me, knowing everything? You have such a bad personality. Oh, right, because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate child. I clenched my jaw. Right, because I'm the one who hung up on you when I tried to warn you, and I'm the one who blocked your calls. Funny how you suddenly unblocked me when you needed help. Who's the one with the bad personality here? The truth was, I had learned all about Dad's financial situation during the inheritance renunciation process. I had tried to inform Steve back then, but he had cut me off entirely, left with no way to communicate. I had given up trying. Now, he was coming to me in tears, just as I had anticipated. Do you even understand how hard it was for Dad to send you to high school and university? I asked, frustrated. Sure, he had educational insurance and Mom's life insurance helped, but things like the house and car had to be paid for with loans. I'm not your sister, right? So why don't you take this up with the mortgage lender or the lawyer instead of me, an outsider? What are you talking about? Steve retorted. Don't sweat the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister, even though you're just a stepchild. You should be happy about that. Now, come on, Kelly, give me some money. Furious at his arrogance, I sharply hung up the call and blocked his number. Steve didn't know where I lived, and I had made sure not to leave any clues about my home at Dad's house. To be safe, I even got a new phone. But that didn't stop him. Kelly, please, I need money, otherwise, I can't survive. Steve started showing up at the city office where I worked. Gone was his usual smugness. He looked genuinely distressed. He would visit repeatedly, always during lunch breaks, as if sneaking away from his job. On days he didn't visit, he bombarded my phone with calls, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, and they moved me to an administrative position, but Steve's harassment escalated. He began staying past closing hours, waiting in the parking lot to confront me after work. One evening, I finally had enough. I caught him lingering in the parking lot and dragged him aside. Stop it already, I said. Don't cause trouble at my workplace. I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer. I already did, Steve snapped, arms crossed, anger flashing in his eyes. The group life insurance covered the mortgage, so I don't have to pay for the house anymore. The car loan is down to about $5,000, and I renegotiated the payments, but that's not the problem. Then what is the problem? I pressed. Steve hesitated, nervously looking around before finally admitting, Dad had some savings, so I spent it on various things. I went over budget. Then I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay him back. He's saying I scammed him, and no one else will lend me money. If I go to a predatory lender, I'll be in even deeper trouble. I sighed, my head pounding. His story was convoluted, but the truth was clear. Steve had spiraled into a financial mess of his own making. So, let me get this straight, I said. You kept borrowing money to pay off debts, and now you're stuck. Exactly, he said, his desperation growing. I think I'm already blacklisted. If you pay it off for me, it'll all be over. Just $88,000. Come on, Kelly. When he reached out to me, I slapped his hand away. There's no way I'm giving you a dime, I said coldly. This is entirely your fault for overspending and borrowing from loan sharks. Why should I clean up your mess? Steve glared at me, his voice dripping with contempt. Is it because we're only half related? Stepchildren are the worst, so selfish and unpleasant. Without another word, I got into my car and started the engine. Steve tried to cling to the door, but I shoved him off. You promised never to contact me again in exchange for the inheritance, I reminded him. You've broken that promise, begged for money, and insulted me. I don't owe you anything. If you show up again, I'll call the police. Kelly, please. I didn't let him finish. I drove off, leaving him behind in the parking lot. Steve continued to harass the city hall after that, showing up uninvited and lingering until closing time. He called multiple departments, disrupting their work. He didn't make a scene at the counters, so reporting him as a nuisance was difficult. Finally, I decided it was best to disappear. I explained everything to HR and was transferred to a branch office in the mountains. It was a quieter place, with fewer residents, but the work felt more fulfilling. I never returned to my old office. I didn't regret cutting ties with Steve, nor did I miss the complications of being labeled a stepchild or a legitimate child. Free at last, I could focus on building a life of my own, far from my brother's shadow. My name is Bella, and life has a way of teaching you who's really in control. Not long ago, I would have eagerly told anyone about my marriage to Willie, brimming with the joy of a newlywed. I truly believed that leaving my promising career at Ventic Tech to focus on our marriage was the right decision. Love, after all, is supposed to be worth more than money, isn't it? Ventic Tech had its quirks, but it also had strict policies, especially about workplace relationships. Once Willie and I tied the knot, we were thrust into an awkward spotlight. Our boss, Gary, wasted no time delivering an ultimatum, with all the theatrics of a reality show host. That evening, our conversation felt like a scene from a high-stakes drama. Blinded by love, I caved. The next day, I handed in my resignation and walked away from a career I had worked so hard to build. Fast forward to today, and here I am, cleaning up spilled cereal because Willie, ever the soon-to-be promoted, can't manage to aim for his bowl. Didn't your mother teach you better? I shout, half joking, toward the living room. My words disappear into the walls, his defensive reply arriving just as invisibly. I let it go. It's not worth another argument. Once, we teased each other with ease. Now, every conversation feels like navigating a minefield. Hours later, Willie is glued to the couch, the TV casting a dull glow over his indifferent face. I glance at the untouched dinner table, the remnants of what we once had haunting the silence. Are we going to talk? Or is that couch your new lifelong commitment? I ask, forcing the words out. About what? His reply is sharp and dismissive, without even a glance in my direction. I count to 12, clinging to patience. About us, about where this mess is heading. My voice cracks slightly. He shrugs. That shrug, heavier than any shout, fills the room with a suffocating silence. The TV chatters on, oblivious to the collapse happening within its reach. That's when it hits me. Our marriage, once so sturdy, now feels like a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. The bond we'd built is crumbling, piece by piece, and neither of us seems to know how to stop it. Life, with its cruel irony, has turned our plans and dreams into fragile remnants of what once was. I linger, watching him. The man on the couch feels like a stranger, a distant passenger I might pass on the street. The shift from warmth to indifference was subtle but devastating, like the first bite of frost signaling the end of summer. Later that evening, I prepare his favorite meal, steak, seasoned and cooked just the way he likes, or so I thought. As he enters the kitchen, his heavy footsteps foreshadow his sour mood. He scans the table like a predator sizing up its prey. He picks up a piece of steak with his hands, ignoring the utensils beside him. Is this the best you can do now? His tone is gritty, like sandpaper. It's slightly cooler than usual, I reply cautiously, referring to the temperature. Not what? He snaps, his glare cutting into me. I bite my tongue, holding back the flood of thoughts. Speaking up would only make things worse. When I say I want my steak hot, he continues, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. I expect to feel the life leaving it as I cut in. This, he jabs the steak with his fork, is already dead and gone. His words, devoid of any shouting, carry a venom so sharp it leaves me hollow. He pushes the plate away and meets my gaze for a fleeting moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of contempt and resignation. Forget it, he mutters, turning away, grabbing his keys. He delivers a final blow. Fix your mistakes, Bella, or next time, it won't just be dinner getting tossed out. The door slams shut behind him, the echo punctuating the end of what little joy remained in our relationship. I stand there, staring at the uneaten meal, wondering how we reached this point, and if there's any way back. I stood motionless, staring at the door Willie had slammed shut behind him. The sound still echoed in the silence of the apartment, reverberating like a final punctuation to an unspoken truth. I exhaled slowly, glancing down at the abandoned steak on the table. Its cold, lifeless state mirrored my own feelings, discarded and forlorn. Each step toward the trash can felt heavier than the last, a somber reminder of what I was throwing away, my effort, my care, and the fragile hope that things could still change. To the outside world, we were the picture of a perfect couple, admired by friends, praised by his parents, but behind closed doors, the reality was far from ideal. Willie's demands had become relentless, chipping away at my self-esteem with every passing day. My life revolved around seeking his approval, which had grown as rare as sunlight in a storm. Tonight was no different. The dinner table became a stage for his critiques. "What's this?" he asked flatly, pointing at the plate of steamed broccoli and grilled chicken I had set before him. "Dinner," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Broccoli again? Do you know how to make anything else?" His words dripped with disdain as he pushed the plate away like it was contaminated. Suppressing a retort, I offered, "I can make something else." His sneer was immediate. That would be a first. The sting of his words fueled a simmering anger within me, but I turned back to the kitchen. Before I could start anew, his sharp voice cut through the air. "Where are you going?" "To cook," I answered, barely keeping the edge out of my tone. He stood abruptly, the screech of his chair grating against the floor. "Sit down. Let's not pretend you have other plans. Your world revolves around me, remember?" His words were a leash, yanking me back into the reality I'd been too afraid to confront. "Yeah," I murmured, defeated, returning to the table. Later that night, as silence filled the apartment, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of unsaid words and unmet dreams pressed down on me. This wasn't a partnership, it was a prison, built on dependence, fear, and a facade of perfection. But life has a way of intervening in unexpected ways. One cold, ordinary day, I slipped on a patch of ice while carrying groceries. Pain shot through my leg, sharp and unforgiving. A few bystanders rushed to help, their concern a stark contrast to the indifference I had grown accustomed to. At the hospital, a doctor confirmed what I already suspected: my leg was broken. "It's broken," he said matter-of-factly, as if announcing the weather. The real pain wasn't from the injury but from the dread of telling Willie. I sent him a text, "Broke my leg." At the hospital, his response never came. That night in the hospital was cold and lonely. The nurses were efficient but distant, and the stale coffee did little to warm me. By morning, I was discharged with crutches, a cast as stark as the snow outside, and a pile of instructions. Willie was waiting when I got home, his face stormy, no concern, no questions about how I was feeling. His first words were, "Where's dinner?" Standing there on crutches, my leg immobilized, something inside me snapped. "What do you think happened? I went dancing? Look at my leg," I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of all I'd held back. He barely flinched. His only response was a dismissive wave of his hand as he turned away, muttering about how I should have been more careful. In that moment, the full extent of his selfishness and neglect hit me like a tidal wave. The life I had tried so hard to salvage wasn't just broken, it was unsalvageable. Willie's tirade made his feelings painfully clear. My broken leg was, in his eyes, an inconvenience I had inflicted on him. "You always have excuses," he spat bitterly. "You can't even do the one thing you're supposed to, can you?" I stared at him, astounded. After a harrowing night in the hospital, his only concern was dinner. The sheer indifference stung more than my injury. The air between us felt as cold as the ice I'd slipped on. A chilling confirmation that this was more than a physical wound, it was a fracture in our relationship, one that had been forming for years. Despite my trembling hands and aching body, I limped to the kitchen and began preparing dinner. Each step felt like an eternity, a cruel mockery of my efforts to maintain normalcy. Near the trash bin, overflowing from a day of neglect, I hesitated. I knew Willie wouldn't let it go. "What's this?" he barked, his sharp tone cutting through the tension. "You're home all day and can't even handle the trash?" He stormed over, fury radiating off him, and with a swift kick, he sent the contents sprawling across the floor. "Clean it up," he commanded. My hand shook as I knelt down, not from the physical pain, but from a deeper, more profound hurt. That night, sleep eluded me as his harsh words echoed in my head, mingling with the hot sting of tears. By morning, nothing had changed except my resolve. The kitchen table was now adorned with divorce papers. As the coffee dripped in the background, Willie stumbled in, bleary-eyed and reeking of alcohol. "Morning," he growled, his voice rough. "What's for breakfast?" Without a word, I pushed the papers toward him. He glanced down, his lips curling into a mocking smile. You serious? He scoffed. As a heart attack, I replied, my heart pounding but my voice steady. He laughed, loud and dismissive. You ain't got the guts. I already filed, I countered, meeting his sneer with a steady gaze. Just need your signature. He leaned in close, his voice low and venomous. You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird, can't even take out the trash. I'm done talking, Willie, I said firmly. Sign the papers, or I'll have the authorities force you to. His face twisted with rage, but he grabbed the pen and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy and deliberate, tossing the pen down like it burned him. He sneered. Good luck, darling, you'll be crawling back before the month's up. But I wouldn't, I couldn't. This was my line in the sand. The moment I refused to accept any more of his cruelty, despite everything, I smiled. Those signed papers felt like my first step, on crutches, maybe, but toward a better life. Crawling's not my style, I murmured. The next morning, an eerie silence greeted me. Over coffee, Willie casually mentioned the property split. Got a lawyer, he said, his tone as commanding as ever. You coming with me? Still healing, with my choices seeming limited, I nodded. Willie helped me into the car, his actions oddly gentle as he propped up my cast. Everything felt strangely normal as we drove, the city skyline shrinking behind us like a distant memory. Suddenly, he pulled over to the side of the highway. The tire might need air, he mumbled, stepping out to inspect it. Leaning heavily on the car, I followed, unsure of his intentions. He pretended to fuss with the tires, his movements calculated. Then, without warning, he jumped back into the driver's seat. Before I could react, he hit the gas and sped off, leaving me stranded. I stood there, stunned, watching his car vanish down the highway, the sound of the engine fading into silence. I gripped my crutches tightly, disbelieving but strangely resolute. Alone on that desolate stretch of road, I realized this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of my freedom. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and called him in desperation. Willie's voice came through cold and smug. Come back, I yelled, my voice cracking with frustration and fear. He just laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. This is what you get for trying to divorce me, he sneered before hanging up. The line went dead, and I stood there, the taillights of his car fading into the distance, alone on the side of a desolate road. The winter chill gnawed at me, a cruel echo of my abandonment. Cars sped past, their drivers oblivious to my plight, their indifference stinging as much as the icy wind. Minutes turned into an eternity until finally, a rattling Jeep truck pulled up beside me. To my shock, it was Gary, my former boss. His gruff, familiar voice broke through my haze. You look like hell, Bella, he said, his concern cutting through the cold. Why didn't you call someone? I shrugged, the weight of the day pressing down on me. Thought I could handle it, I murmured, ashamed of how wrong I'd been. Gary's expression darkened. He left you here, with a broken leg? That man's a coward, he growled, helping me into the warmth of his Jeep. The drive to Ventic Tech was quiet but heavy with unspoken understanding. Gary guided me into his office, where he handed me a steaming mug of coffee. The warmth seeped into my frozen hands, thawing both my body and my spirits. Thanks, I said softly, taking a sip. Gary paced, his agitation evident. I can't believe that bastard, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then, turning to face me, he asked, what are you going to do now, Bella? I don't know, I admitted, the uncertainty of my future looming large. He leaned forward, his expression serious. We need you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. You serious? As a heart attack, he replied. You're the best we ever had. I should have fought harder to keep you. I glanced down at my cast. Might be tricky with this. Gary waved off my concern. We'll manage. I'll wait until you're ready. No excuses. No saying no. I smiled faintly, touched by his belief in me. I'll think about it, I said, though deep down, I'd already decided. The tension in the office was palpable as Willie stormed in the next morning. His boots thudded across the floor with less certainty than usual. When he saw me standing beside Gary, his face paled before quickly hardening into a sneer. What's this about? He barked, his voice edged with defiance. Gary gestured to a chair. Sit, he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Willie remained standing, crossing his arms in a show of bravado. Willie, Gary began, his gaze cold and cutting. I've seen some poor decisions in my time, but what you've done takes the cake. Willie's eyes darted to me, his expression a mix of anger and fear. What lies has she been feeding you? No lies needed, I replied calmly, just the truth, recorded loud and clear. Gary slid a recording device across the desk. Care to listen to your greatest hits? Willie's face went ashen. You can't fire me over this, he sputtered. Oh, I can, and I am, Gary shot back, his voice like steel. Willie's desperation mounted. I'll sue. Go ahead, I said, my voice cold, but you'll lose. I've got all the evidence I need, and you've got nothing but empty threats. Gary stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor like a declaration of war. Get out, Willie, you're done here. Willie stormed out, defeated, and the weight of his departure lifted from my shoulders. In court, the judge's gavel fell decisively. This court grants the separation and orders compensation to be paid, the judge declared. It felt like the first breath of spring, chilly but full of promise. Back at work, I settled into a rhythm, every keystroke a step toward rebuilding my life. My colleagues' greetings were warm, their support unwavering. Feels weird, huh? Harold said one morning, leaning against my desk. I smiled. Weird doesn't cover it. Feels like I've come back from the dead. He chuckled. Zombie Bella, back for revenge? Something like that, I said, grinning, but this time, I'm not taking crap from anyone. That's the spirit, Harold said, his nod full of encouragement. This wasn't just a fresh start, it was a reclaimed life, and I was ready to live it on my terms.
I stared at the text message from my father for a full minute, letting the familiar sting of dismissal wash over me. Meetings at 10 a.m. You can watch the live stream. Too many people in the boardroom already. Sutton Technologies' gleaming headquarters stretched 40 stories into the Manhattan skyline, each window reflecting the morning sun like a reminder of everything I'd helped build. I designed the international expansion strategy that took us from a $20 million family business to a $400 million tech empire. But apparently, I didn't deserve a seat at the table. My name is Catherine Sutton, and at 35, I was technically the executive vice president of global strategy. Technically, because my father, Richard Sutton, had slowly been stripping away my responsibilities for the past year, redistributing them to my younger brother, James, and his fraternity brother turned CFO, Mark Davidson. I glanced at my watch. 9:45 a.m. The acquisition meeting would start soon. Masterson Corp., our biggest competitor, had made an unsolicited offer to buy Sutton Technologies for $580 million, a hostile takeover wrapped in a friendly envelope. Miss Sutton? My assistant, Olivia Pierce, appeared in my office doorway. Everything's ready. I nodded, trying to hide my bitterness. They're not expecting us in the boardroom. No, she agreed, a slight smile playing at her lips. They're not. Olivia had been with me for 3 years, ever since I hired her fresh from Harvard Business School. While everyone else saw a quiet, efficient assistant, I recognized something more, a strategic mind sharp enough to cut diamond. Through the glass walls of my 38th floor office, I could see people filing into the main boardroom 2 floors below. James in his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, Mark with his Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights, and my father holding court at the head of the table. My phone buzzed again. A message from James. Don't worry, sis. We'll fill you in after we close the deal. That smirking emoji was the last straw. Olivia, I said quietly, show me. She placed a thick folder on my desk, opening it to reveal documents I'd never seen before. Stock purchase agreements, voting trust certificates, private placement memorandums, all dated over the past 18 months. How? I started. When they began sidelining you, Olivia explained, I started tracking unusual transactions. Small stock sales, privately held shares changing hands. Your brother has been quietly selling his shares to raise cash for his new venture fund. I leaned forward, scrutinizing the numbers. How many shares? Combined with your existing 15% stake and what I've acquired through various shell companies. She paused. We now control 51.3% of Sutton Technologies. My head snapped up. We? Olivia's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing a flash of steel underneath. The shares are held by Winter Bridge Capital. You're the sole director. I sat back, realization dawning. While they'd been playing corporate politics, Olivia had been executing a silent takeover. Every time they excluded me from a meeting, every time they dismissed my input, they'd never noticed her quietly collecting proxy rights and purchasing shares. The Masterson offer? I asked. A setup, she confirmed. I may have suggested to their board that Sutton Technologies was vulnerable. They did exactly what we expected. Through the glass, I could see the Masterson Corp representatives entering the boardroom. Their lawyer began distributing documents as my father smiled broadly, probably already counting his payout. They think this meeting is about selling the company, I said slowly. It is. Olivia's smile widened slightly. Just not to Masterson. My phone lit up with another text from James. Boardroom's packed. Live stream link in your email. Don't want to miss your baby brother's big moment. I looked at the document in front of me, then at Olivia, then at the smug faces in the boardroom below. How long until they realize? The meeting starts in 3 minutes, she replied, checking her tablet. I'd say they'll figure it out in about 10. I stood up, smoothing my channel blazer. Let's not keep them waiting then. One more thing, Olivia added, pulling out another folder. You'll want to see the internal audit results before we go in, particularly the section about James's creative accounting. I flicked through the pages, my eyes widening at the documented evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. They hadn't just been pushing me out. They'd been looting the company. Everything's verified, I asked. Triple-checked. The SEC would be very interested. I closed the folder, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. Years of being underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed had led to this moment. Send the live stream link to my phone, I said, gathering the documents. I want to watch their faces when we walk in. Olivia nodded, already typing. Security has been notified. It is standing by to cut access to all systems on your signal. I took one last look at my office, at the company I'd helped build, at the family that had tried to push me out. In 10 minutes, everything would change. Ready? Olivia asked, holding the door. I smiled, feeling the weight of 51.3% ownership in my hands. Let's go say hello to the board. The elevator ride down to the 36th floor was silent except for the soft tap of Olivia's fingers on her tablet. She'd organized everything meticulously. Security teams positioned at every exit, it ready to lock down all systems, even a press release drafted and ready to go. The Masterson team doesn't know, I asked. They think they're here for a standard acquisition meeting, Olivia confirmed. Their CEO's face, when he realizes he's been played, should be interesting. Through my phone, I watched the live stream as James took the podium. His confidence was breathtaking. Standing there in his $5,000 suit, addressing the board like he'd earned his position through something other than nepotism. Today marks a historic moment for Sutton Technologies, he announced, his voice carrying through my earpiece. The Masterson acquisition represents. I muted the audio, turning to Olivia. Show me the proof of embezzlement again. She pulled up detailed financial records on her tablet. Over the past 18 months, James and Mark had systematically siphoned off nearly $28 million through a complex web of shell companies and fake vendor contracts. The pattern is obvious once you know where to look, Olivia explained. They created consulting firms that existed only on paper, then billed Sutton Technologies for services never rendered. Classic fraud, just executed with better paperwork. And Dad knew everything, signed off on most of it. We have his electronic signatures on all the key documents. The elevator stopped. Through the glass walls, I could see the boardroom 20 feet away. James was still speaking, gesturing enthusiastically, at a PowerPoint presentation about synergy opportunities. Ms. Sutton, a deep voice greeted us. Michael Chen, head of security, stood waiting with two of his team. Everything's in position. I nodded. Anyone tries to leave that room without my permission. They don't, he finished firmly. My phone buzzed again. Another text from James. Killing it in here, sis. Don't worry, I'll make sure you keep your job after the merger. I showed the message to Olivia, who actually laughed. Should we tell him you've already decided on his severance package? Let's break his heart gently, I replied, though we both knew there would be nothing gentle about what came next. I pulled up the internal audit report on my phone, sending copies to every board member's email with a single click. In the boardroom, I watched as phones began buzzing simultaneously. James faltered mid-sentence as notifications lit up across the room. My father frowned, reaching for his phone. Mark's face suddenly lost its smug expression as he opened the document. Right on schedule, Olivia murmured, checking her watch. Would you like to see the surveillance footage we gathered? She pulled up videos on her tablet. James meeting with fraudulent vendors in underground parking lots. Mark shredding documents after hours. My father in his office, explicitly discussing how to hide transactions from Catherine's prying eyes. They never considered that your quiet assistant might be watching, Olivia said, her satisfaction evident. Rich men in expensive suits tend to ignore women they consider beneath them. Through the glass, I could see the panic spreading. Board members were whispering urgently to each other. The Masterson team looked confused. James had stopped speaking entirely, his face growing paler by the second. My father stood up abruptly. We need a brief recess. Actually, I said into my phone, triggering the boardroom speaker system. You need to stay exactly where you are. Every head in the room snapped toward the sound of my voice. Through the glass walls, they could see me standing in the hallway, Olivia by my side, security personnel positioned strategically behind us. The meeting will continue, I continued, my voice echoing through the speakers, just with a slightly different agenda. What is this? James demanded, but his voice shook slightly. Check your email again, I replied. You'll find updated ownership records for Sutton Technologies. Pay particular attention to the controlling interest section. I watched through the glass as they frantically refreshed their phones. The color drained from my father's face as he realized what he was seeing. Impossible, he whispered, but the microphones picked it up. These shares? Where did they? Would you like to explain the fraudulent consulting contracts first? I asked. Or should we start with the offshore accounts you've been hiding from the IRS? Mark jumped to his feet. You can't prove. Sit down, Mr. Davidson. Olivia spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clearly through the speakers. The SEC has already received copies of everything we're about to discuss. The Masterson CEO looked between us and my family, realization dawning on his face. This isn't an acquisition meeting, is it? Oh, it is, I replied. Just not the one you were expecting. I nodded to Olivia, who pressed a button on her tablet. The boardroom's main screen lit up with a new presentation: Sutton Technologies Restructuring Plan, effective immediately. "Now," I said, reaching for the boardroom door handle, "shall we begin?" The faces staring back at me were a symphony of shock, betrayal, and dawning horror. My father gripped the table like it might save him. James looked like he might throw up on his expensive shoes. I smiled, feeling the weight of years of dismissal falling away. "I hope you saved the live stream link, little brother. You won't want to miss what happens next." The boardroom fell silent as I walked in, Olivia 2 steps behind me, security positioned at every exit. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. "Catherine," my father started, attempting to regain control. "This is highly irregular." "Irregular?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Like the $28 million missing from company accounts. Or irregular like the fake consulting firms James has been running." The Masterson team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their CEO, David Masterson, looked like he was calculating his fastest escape route. "Mr. Masterson," I turned to him, "I apologize for the deception. You were brought here under false pretenses." "I'm beginning to gather that," he replied dryly. "Olivia, please show everyone the real numbers." She pressed a button on her tablet, and the screen filled with transaction records, bank statements, and damning email threads. "Over the past 18 months, I announced, James Sutton and Mark Davidson, with full knowledge and approval from CEO Richard Sutton, have systematically embezzled $28.4 million through a network of shell companies." James shot to his feet. "You don't have proof." "September 15th, 2:14 p.m., Olivia interrupted smoothly. "Your meeting with Thomas Werner in the parking garage of the Four Seasons. Would you like to see the surveillance footage?" She pulled up the video. James's face went from red to gray as he watched himself accepting an envelope, the audio crystal clear. "Dad will sign off on the invoices. Catherine won't notice a thing." "Or perhaps," I continued, "we should discuss the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the ones holding funds stolen from company pension plans." Mark Davidson started edging toward the door, but Michael Chen stepped forward, blocking his path. "Sit down, Mr. Davidson," I said coldly. "The FBI will want to speak with you about those wire transfers." My father stood up slowly, his authority visibly crumbling. "Catherine, whatever you think you found, we can explain." "Like you explained cutting my voting rights?" I asked. "Or how about explaining why my signature was forged on board resolutions I never saw?" I nodded to Olivia, who distributed thick folders to each board member. "Inside you'll find detailed evidence of fraud, tax evasion, and securities violations. The SEC has already been notified." However, I paused, letting the thread hang. "There might be room for discretion, depending on your cooperation in the next few minutes." The independent board members were already flipping through the documents, their expressions growing more horrified with each page. "Jesus Christ, Richard," one of them muttered. "What have you done?" "What I had to do," my father snapped. This company needed strong leadership, not some overeducated consultant playing at business. "Playing?" I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. "While you were playing with fraudulent contracts, I was building the Asian market from scratch. While James was stealing from pension funds, I was developing the technology that tripled our market share." I walked to the head of the table, his seat, until now. "Would you like to know what your strong leadership has cost?" I pressed a button, and new figures filled the screen. Stock value down 23% in 6 months. Client retention falling. Innovation stagnant. The Masterson offer would have solved. James started. The Masterson offer was a trap. David Masterson himself interrupted. One your sister apparently set. He turned to me, genuine admiration in his voice. Well played, Miss Sutton. Thank you, I replied. Now shall we discuss the real changes happening today? I placed a single document on the table. Winterbridge Capital now controls 51.3% of Sutton Technologies. I am the sole director. Impossible, James whispered. I would have known if that many shares were. Too busy checking your offshore accounts? Olivia asked innocently. Or maybe too busy ignoring the quiet assistant who watched you steal from your own company. The room erupted in chaos. Board members demanded explanations. The Masterson team started gathering their things. James looked like he might pass out. Enough. My voice cut through the noise. Here's what happens next. I began laying out documents one by one. Richard Sutton, James Sutton, and Mark Davidson are hereby removed from all positions within Sutton Technologies. Your access to all company systems and facilities will be revoked in. I checked my watch. Approximately 45 seconds. You can't. My father began. I can and I am. Furthermore, you have exactly 48 hours to return every dollar stolen from this company, or the FBI gets everything we've collected. Mark Davidson slumped in his chair, defeated. James was texting frantically, probably to his lawyers. The board will be restructured. I continued. Mr. Masterson, I believe we can find more productive ways to collaborate than a hostile takeover. He nodded thoughtfully. I look forward to those discussions. And finally, I turned to my father, who had aged a decade in the past hour. You should know that Mom's trust fund, the one you've been trying to access, I've already moved it beyond your reach. That was the final blow. He fell back into his chair, all pretense of authority gone. Olivia, I said quietly, please escort my family out of the building. Their personal items will be shipped to them after a thorough audit. She smiled, pressing a final button on her tablet. Throughout the building, doors clicked as security protocols engaged. It's done, she said. All access revoked. I looked at my father, brother, and their co-conspirator one last time. I believe you can watch the rest of this meeting online, I said. The live stream link should still work. The next 24 hours transformed Sutton Technologies. Security teams supervised as James, Mark, and my father were escorted from the building, their access cards deactivated, their emails archived and frozen. Employees watched in stunned silence as the men who had ruled the company like their personal kingdom were reduced to civilians waiting for their drivers on the street below. By midnight, Olivia had orchestrated a complete digital lockdown. Every password changed, every account secured, every document preserved for the pending investigations. She worked with a quiet efficiency that made me realize why she'd been so effective at gathering evidence. No one had ever really seen her coming. The offshore accounts are being frozen, she reported, bringing me coffee and my father's. Now my office on the top floor. Their personal devices have been remotely wiped of company data, though James did try to delete quite a few interesting emails first. I looked out over the Manhattan skyline, the city lights reflecting off buildings like stars. Any response to the repayment demand? Their lawyers contacted us an hour ago. They're willing to negotiate terms. I turned from the window. There are no terms. Full repayment or federal prosecution. They have? I checked my watch. 39 hours left to decide. The next morning, the Wall Street Journal ran the story. Sutton Technologies announces leadership change amid financial investigation. The stock actually rose 8% in early trading as investors responded to the transparency and decisive action. I spent the day in back-to-back meetings with board members, executives, and team leaders. Many had suspected something was wrong, but had been too afraid to speak up. Now, with evidence of the fraud exposed, the stories came pouring out. They killed my entire development budget, the head of R&D confided. Said we needed to focus on core profit centers. Now I know where that money really went. By evening, the first wire transfers arrived. James surrendered first, returning $8.2 million from his Cayman accounts. Mark Davidson followed with $6.5 million, along with a signed confession his lawyers probably hadn't approved. My father held out until hour 47. His transfer of $13.7 million came with a single-line email. "You've destroyed this family." I forwarded his message to Olivia, who had become my de facto chief of staff. She replied within seconds. "No, they destroyed it themselves. You just exposed the rot." 1 week after the takeover, I called my first full company meeting. The auditorium was packed with employees from every department, the tension palpable as I took the stage. "Many of you have worked here longer than I have," I began. "You've watched the company grow, change, and lately, stumble. Today, I want to share our path forward." Over the next hour, I outlined the new Sutton Technologies, increased R&D funding, restored pension plans, merit-based promotions, and a complete restructuring of the executive team based on talent rather than connections. Transparency and innovation will be our foundations, I announced. No more hidden accounts, no more fraudulent contracts, no more decisions made in secret boardrooms. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous standing ovation. In the back, I saw Olivia smile for the first time in days. The changes came quickly after that. David Masterson and I negotiated a strategic partnership instead of a takeover, combining our technologies to open new markets. The stock rose another 15% on the announcement. James attempted one last power play, trying to rally shareholders for a proxy fight. It died quickly when Olivia released evidence of his attempts to delete incriminating emails. He resigned his shares in exchange for avoiding criminal charges, though the IRS was still very interested in his tax returns. 3 months after the takeover, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly results. Revenue up 24%. Employee retention improved. Innovation pipeline fuller than ever. A knock at the door interrupted my analysis. Olivia entered, carrying a newspaper. "You might want to see this," she said, handing me the business section. The headline read, "Sutton Technologies named most innovative company in tech sector." Below was a photo of me in the new research lab we'd opened, surrounded by engineers and developers. "There's something else," Olivia added, placing a folder on my desk. "Your father's trying to access the company pension fund again, through a proxy this time." I sighed, opening the folder. "Send everything to the SEC. No more protecting them from consequences." She nodded, then hesitated. "He's also requested a meeting. Says he wants to heal the family." I thought about the years of dismissal, the casual cruelty, the systematic destruction of everything I'd worked for. Then I thought about the company we were building now, stronger and more ethical than they could have imagined. "Tell him he can watch our next shareholders meeting online," I replied. "The live stream link still works." Olivia smiled, understanding perfectly. I'll have security update the blocked list. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Why did you do it? Help me take them down. She paused at the door. Because you built while they destroyed. Because you earned everything they stole. She straightened her impeccable blazer. And because I believe talent and integrity should win over privilege and fraud. I nodded, turning back to the quarterly reports. Outside my window, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones you should watch most carefully. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the takeover, but in rebuilding something better from the ruins of betrayal. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice comes with a corner office and a really good assistant. I smoothed my Prada dress as I walked into the country club, the invitation to my mother's 60th birthday party feeling heavy in my designer clutch. Not because of the fit card stock, but because of the handwritten note my sister Jessica had added. Try to dress appropriately this time. No need to remind everyone about your career choices. My name is Victoria Chen, and at 32, I was apparently still the family disappointment. Despite building a successful private equity firm from scratch, despite managing over $2 billion in assets, I was still the one who had abandoned the family practice to play with money. The Maxwell Country Club's grand ballroom was decorated in my mother's favorite cream and gold theme. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows over round tables where Seattle's most prominent medical families gathered to celebrate Dr. Diana Chen, renowned neurosurgeon and perfect mother, at least to my siblings. Vicky, my father's voice boomed across the room. Dr. William Chen, chief of surgery, approached with my sister Jessica and brother Michael flanking him like perfectly groomed satellites. Both followed in his medical footsteps. Jessica, a cardiothoracic surgeon, Michael a neurosurgeon like Mom. You came, Jessica said, eyeing my dress with barely concealed criticism. And in red. How bold. I bit back a retort about how my Prada probably cost more than her monthly salary. Happy birthday, Mom, I said instead, turning to the guest of honor. My mother's smile was practiced, professional, the same one she used for hospital board meetings. Thank you for coming, Victoria. Your Aunt Sarah was just asking about you. Aunt Sarah, the family gossip coordinator. Right on cue, she materialized beside us, wine glass in hand. Victoria, darling, she trilled. Still doing that investment thing. Such a shame about medical school. You had such potential. I forced a smile. The investment thing is going quite well, actually. We just closed a major. Oh, Jessica, tell everyone about your latest surgery. Aunt Sarah interrupted, effectively dismissing my accomplishments. 12 hours in the OR, I heard. Simply brilliant. The pattern was familiar. Every family gathering became a medical conference where my siblings' achievements were celebrated, while my success in finance was treated like a hobby gone too far. Never mind that my firm, Aurora Capital, had become one of the most successful boutique investment firms on the West Coast. I checked my phone discreetly. A message from my executive assistant, Margaret. Everything's ready. Documents signed. Press release approved. Should I proceed as planned? I typed back quickly. Wait for my signal. Victoria, put the phone away, my mother chided. It's time for the toasts. The guests gathered around the main table. One by one, my family members stood to praise the birthday girl. Father spoke about their shared passion for medicine. Michael discussed following in her footsteps. Jessica tearfully thanked Mom for being her role model in a male-dominated surgical field. Then Aunt Sarah stood up, champagne glass swaying slightly. To my beloved sister-in-law, who raised 3 children. Well, 2 successful doctors at least. She laughed, others joining in. Some of us just aren't cut out for greatness, right, Victoria? The room tittered. Jessica smirked. Michael at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. She's always been a disappointment, Aunt Sarah continued, warming to her theme. But Diana never gave up hope that Victoria would come to her senses. There's still time for medical school, dear. More laughter. My mother didn't even bother to defend me, just smiled. That practiced smile. I felt my phone buzz again. Margaret. CNN wants a comment on the acquisition. NYT running the story in 10 minutes. Should I delay? I looked around the room at my laughing relatives, at the decades of dismissal crystallized in their smirking faces, at my siblings' smug superiority and my parents' practiced disappointment. No, I typed back. Come now. Bring everything. On my way, she replied immediately. 3 minutes. I stood up, smoothing my red dress again. Actually, Aunt Sarah, I have an announcement of my own. Victoria, my father warned. This is your mother's moment. Oh, I think Mom will want to hear this, I said, just as the ballroom doors opened. Margaret walked in, impeccable in a tailored black suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Her heels clicked purposefully across the marble floor as conversations died away. I apologize for interrupting, she said professionally. But Ms. Chen, the acquisition is complete. You're now officially the owner of Pacific Northwest Medical Group. The sound of dropped forks hitting fine china echoed through the suddenly silent room. My father's face went pale. Pacific Northwest, that's our hospital group. Was your hospital group, I corrected quietly, along with all 18 locations, the research facilities, and the medical school. Jessica's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. That's impossible, my mother whispered. The board would never sell to an outsider. I smiled, channeling years of boardroom negotiations. They would win the outsider offers $4.8 billion and a guaranteed 30% increase in research funding. Margaret began distributing press packets to the stunned guests, many of whom, I noted with satisfaction, were board members of the now former Pacific Northwest Medical Group. Happy birthday, Mom, I said softly. I hope you don't mind that I bought the family business. I know how much you all value medical tradition. The room erupted in chaos as my phone began lighting up with news alerts. I nodded to Margaret, who stepped forward with the full announcement package. Sometimes the biggest disappointments come with billion-dollar price tags. The next few minutes unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of shock. Margaret distributed detailed press packets outlining the acquisition, while my phone continuously lit up with notifications from Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Reuters. Pacific Northwest Medical Group acquired in $4.8 billion deal by Aurora Capital. Breaking. Largest medical group acquisition of 2024. Victoria Chen, the private equity queen, who just bought her family's legacy. My father grabbed one of the press packets, his hands shaking slightly. This is a joke. It has to be. Page 3 as the complete transaction summary, I offered helpfully. The board voted unanimously this morning, though I'm sure Aunt Sarah's husband Robert can confirm that, being the board secretary and all. All eyes turned to Uncle Robert, who suddenly seemed very interested in his water glass. Robert? Aunt Sarah's voice rose shrilly. Did you know about this? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. The offer was extremely generous. The pension guarantees alone were unprecedented. Margaret stepped forward again, her tablet displaying real-time updates. Ms. Chen, CNBC is requesting a live interview in 20 minutes. Also, the first wave of organizational changes is ready to implement. Jessica jumped up. Organizational changes? You can't just walk in and start firing people. Actually, I replied calmly, as the new majority owner, I can, but I'm more interested in certain strategic repositioning. I nodded to Margaret, who pulled up a document on her tablet. Dr. Michael Chen, she read professionally, currently heading neurosurgery at Pacific Northwest General, is being transferred to our new research facility in Anchorage, Alaska. Michael's face went from red to white. Alaska? Don't worry, I assured him. The Polar Bear Research Initiative is fascinating. Mom always said you had a way with dangerous animals. This is revenge, my mother said quietly, finally finding her voice. Because we wouldn't support your decision to leave medicine. I turned to her, keeping my expression neutral. No, Mom. This is business. Something none of you ever bothered to understand. Margaret continued reading. Dr. Jessica Chen's cardiac unit is being restructured. Her new position will be coordinating with our rural satellite clinics in eastern Washington. Rural clinics? Jessica shrieked. My research will be handled by more qualified teams, I finished. Teams that don't falsify data to get published. The room went silent again. Jessica's face drained of all color. Oh yes, I added, the acquisition due diligence was very thorough. We found some interesting irregularities in your last 3 papers. The medical board will be receiving a full report next week. My father stood up, attempting to reassert control. Now listen here. No, Dad, you listen. I held up my phone, displaying a chart. Pacific Northwest's profit margins have dropped 40% under your leadership. The research department has fallen to 9th place nationally. The only thing growing is the administrative bloat that keeps our dear family members in cushy positions. Margaret distributed another set of documents. The comprehensive audit results, she explained to the stunned room, including detailed breakdowns of nepotism in hiring practices, misallocation of research funds, and some creative accounting in the charity care program. Several board members began urgently texting their lawyers. Aunt Sarah was practically hyperventilating. You've been running this hospital group like a family country club, I continued. Promoting based on last names rather than talent. That ends today. My mother's birthday cake sat forgotten on the main table. 60 unlit candles standing like accusatory fingers. The press release goes wide in 2 minutes, Margaret announced. The markets open in 12 hours. Would you like me to summarize the projected stock impact? I smiled. No need. I'm sure my family understands basic economics. When news breaks that Aurora Capital is modernizing Pacific Northwest's outdated management structure, shares should jump at least 25%. You can't do this to your own family, my mother pleaded. Funny, I replied. That's exactly what I said when you all turned your backs on me for choosing finance over medicine. When you excluded me from family events because I was an embarrassment. When you told every family friend that your daughter was finding herself instead of acknowledging I was building a billion-dollar company. I walked to the main table and picked up the champagne bottle. But let's not waste Mom's birthday party on business talk. After all, family comes first, right? That's what you always said, Dad. The door opened again as my firm's PR team entered, followed by photographers from major business publications. Mrs. Chen, one of them called out. Could we get a photo of you with your daughter? The businesswoman who just made your hospital group national news. My mother's practiced smile completely failed her. Actually, I said, let's make it a real family photo. Jessica, Michael, come stand by Mom. Dad, too. I turned to Aunt Sarah. You should join as well. After all, you've all been so supportive of my career choices. They moved stiffly into position, years of society photos making it automatic even in crisis. Perfect, I said, raising my glass. Margaret, please make sure everyone has champagne. We should toast properly. Margaret efficiently distributed glasses, though most hands that took them were shaking. To family, I announced, my voice carrying clearly for the photographers, and to never being a disappointment again. The cameras flashed, capturing the exact moment my family realized that their medical empire now answered to the daughter they dismissed for so long. The aftermath was immediate and dramatic. As the photographers captured the forced family portrait, Margaret's tablet beeped with incoming market reactions. Pre-market trading had Pacific Northwest stock up 28% on news of the acquisition. Victoria, my father hissed between staged smiles. We need to talk privately. Now, of course, I agreed pleasantly. Margaret, please show the press to the conference room next door. We'll join them shortly for the official statements. As the media filed out, my father's professional demeanor cracked completely. How long have you been planning this? This hostile takeover? Hostile? I raised an eyebrow. The board voted unanimously. Though you'd know that if you'd attended the meeting instead of sending your proxy to Uncle Robert. Because I was planning your mother's birthday, he exploded. No, I corrected. Because you never thought I'd be capable of something like this. The disappointment couldn't possibly understand enough about business to outmaneuver the great Dr. William Chen. Jessica stepped forward, her surgeon's confidence wavering. The rural clinics. You can't really mean to. Page 12 of the reorganization plan. Margaret interjected smoothly, handing her a detailed document. Your transfer is effective Monday. The housing allowance in Yakima is quite generous. Yakima? Jessica whispered, horror-struck. Consider it a character-building opportunity, I smiled. Mom always said we should give back to underserved communities. Michael was frantically scanning his own transfer papers. This is ridiculous. I'm one of the top neurosurgeons in Seattle. You're the son of the top neurosurgeon in Seattle, I corrected. There's a difference. One, the medical board will be very interested in when they review your certification history. My mother, who had been unnaturally quiet, finally spoke. What do you want, Victoria? Money. Recognition? Is this about your trust fund? I laughed, the sound echoing off the crystal chandeliers. My firm manages $2 billion in assets, Mom. I make more last quarter than the trust fund is worth. Then why? She demanded. Margaret, I called. Show them the other folder. My assistant produced a thick file, placing it on the table next to the untouched birthday cake. Inside were papers spanning 15 years. Every dismissive email, every snide comment about my career choice documented in family correspondence. Every time they'd excluded me from medical galas or fundraisers because I was just in finance. I kept everything, I explained. Every time Aunt Sarah announced my failure at family events. Every time Jessica told hospital staff I couldn't hack it in medicine. Every time Dad introduced Michael as his successful child at medical conferences. The room was dead silent now, not even Aunt Sarah daring to speak. But most importantly, I continued, pulling out one final document. I kept Mom's letter from 3 years ago. The one where you said you were grateful your reputation in the medical community wouldn't be tarnished by my choices anymore. My mother's face went ashen. That was private. Like the private board meetings where you blocked Aurora Capital from hospital partnerships because you didn't want your daughter's hobby business associated with Pacific Northwest, I asked sweetly. Those kinds of private discussions. Margaret's tablet chimed again. Ms. Chin, the SEC filing is complete. Would you like me to announce the new board composition? Please do, I nodded. She turned to address the stunned family. The new board of directors for Pacific Northwest Medical Group will be led by Chairwoman Victoria Chen. The executive committee includes 3 Harvard Business School professors, 2 healthcare innovation experts, and the former CEO of Mayo Clinic. You're taking control of the board? My father stammered. I already have, I corrected. The shareholder vote was this morning. Though you'd know that if you read any of the proxies you signed last month. Amazing how people don't question paperwork when they think they're too important to be challenged. Jessica sank into a chair, her perfect surgical posture crumpling. This will ruin us. No, I said firmly. This will fix what you ruined. Pacific Northwest's rankings have dropped every year under family management. The research output is a joke. The only things growing are the administrative salaries for family members. I picked up my champagne glass again. But thanks to Mom's excellent birthday party timing, we get to announce the restructuring as a positive transformation. Beloved Family Medical Group embraces next-generation leadership. Much better headlines than nepotism-riddled hospital group forced to modernize. Margaret approached with a final set of papers. The press is ready for your statement, and Dr. William Chen's office has been cleared as requested. My father's head snapped up. My office? The new CEO starts Monday, I explained. She's from Johns Hopkins. Highly recommended. Though she might keep some of your degrees on the wall, as a historical reference. The weight of what was happening finally seemed to hit them. This wasn't just an acquisition, it was a complete dismantling of their medical dynasty. You've destroyed this family, my mother whispered. I straightened my red dress, checking my reflection in a nearby mirror. No, Mom. I've just reorganized it. More efficiently, more professionally, and more profitably. I smiled. Isn't that what you always wanted? For me to learn from your example? Margaret opened the ballroom doors, where cameras and reporters waited. Now, I said, shall we go tell everyone about the exciting changes coming to Pacific Northwest Medical Group? After all, it's a birthday celebration. We should give them something to remember. The following weeks transformed Pacific Northwest Medical Group with the same surgical precision my family had once prided themselves on. Margaret orchestrated the transitions flawlessly, each change cutting deeper into the old dynasty's power structure. Jessica's rural reassignment made the local medical newsletter. Top Seattle surgeon brings expertise to underserved communities. The PR team crafted it perfectly, making any complaint from her sound like elitism. She lasted 2 weeks in Yakima before resigning. Last I heard, she was interviewing at small private practices in Portland. Michael's Alaskan adventure never materialized. The morning his transfer was announced, 3 different medical boards received anonymous tips about his certification irregularities. He took an indefinite leave of absence to spend time with family. The fact that this coincided with a formal investigation was, officially, unrelated. Aunt Sarah's husband, Robert, quietly retired from the board, though the SEC's interest in certain voting irregularities during his tenure suggested the quiet wouldn't last. They sold their Bellevue mansion and moved to Arizona, citing the better weather rather than the ongoing audit of family banking records. My father held out the longest, attempting to rally his old medical school contacts for support. But influence only goes so far when faced with stockholder satisfaction. Pacific Northwest's share price had jumped 45% in the first month under new management. Efficiency was up, costs were down, and research grants had doubled. The Q1 numbers are excellent, Margaret reported one morning, exactly 30 days after my mother's birthday party. The Wall Street Journal is running a feature on the successful transformation of family-run medical groups. They're calling you a healthcare visionary. I smiled, looking out from my new office, formerly my father's, at the Seattle skyline. And the staff satisfaction surveys? Up 62% since removing the family preference hiring policies. Turns out people appreciate promotions based on merit rather than last names. A knock at the door interrupted us. My mother stood there, looking smaller somehow in regular clothes rather than her usual surgical attire. "Victoria," she said stiffly, "do you have a moment?" Margaret glanced at me questioningly. I nodded. "Give us 10 minutes. Once we were alone, my mother took in the office changes. The modern art replacing Dad's medical diplomas, the sleek furniture, the empty spaces where family photos once stood. "Your father's taking an advisory position at Stanford," she announced. "We're moving to California next month." "I know," I replied. "The board approved his resignation this morning." She flinched slightly at the reminder of the new power structure. Was any of this necessary? This public humiliation of your own family? I leaned back in my chair, not my father's anymore. Was it necessary to humiliate me for 15 years because I chose a different path? Was it necessary to block business partnerships because you were embarrassed by my success? Was it necessary to call me a disappointment at every family gathering? "We wanted what was best for you," she insisted. "No," I corrected. "You wanted what was best for your reputation. There's a difference." I pulled out my tablet, showing her the latest hospital rankings. Pacific Northwest is up 12 spots nationally. Research funding has doubled. Patient satisfaction is at an all-time high. Tell me again how I disappointed the family legacy. She stared at the numbers, her medical training making them impossible to dismiss. "And this was your plan all along, to take over and push us out." "Actually," I said thoughtfully, "I tried 3 times to partner with Pacific Northwest properly, to bring in capital, to modernize operations, to collaborate. You and Dad blocked it each time because you couldn't stand the idea of your failed daughter having any influence." I stood up, walking to the window. "So yes, when the board approached Aurora Capital about acquisition talks, I took the opportunity. But you created the situation where that was the only option left. And now?" she asked quietly. "What happens to this family now?" I turned back to her. "That depends on whether you can finally accept that your daughter built something valuable, even if it wasn't what you planned." She was quiet for a long moment, looking around the office that represented everything they'd lost and everything I'd gained. "The hospital," she started, then corrected herself. "The medical group is doing better. The numbers prove it." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Dr. Diana Chen, it was close. "Yes," I agreed, "it is." She nodded once, gathering her designer handbag. "Stanford will be different. A fresh start, perhaps." "Perhaps?" I echoed. At the door, she paused. "That red dress, at my birthday, It was quite striking. Then she was gone, the click of her heels fading down the hallway. Margaret entered a moment later. "Everything okay?" I smiled, sitting back down at my desk. "Schedule a call with Stanford's board for next week. Let's discuss potential West Coast partnerships." She raised an eyebrow, offering an olive branch. "No," I replied, picking up the latest financial report. "Just good business. After all, that's what the disappointment does best." The Seattle sunshine streamed through my office windows, lighting up the space that had once represented everything I couldn't have. Now it was simply another milestone in the empire I'd built. Not despite my family's dismissal, but because of it. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying what others built, but in building something better than they ever imagined possible. Even if it takes a birthday party to deliver the news.
I was happily settled in life, having married into a wealthy family, yet Mason sat across from me in the hotel lobby, mockingly commenting on my seemingly simple lifestyle. His sharp voice pierced the calm, taunting me with his latest boast. He had married the daughter of the president of Goldsmith Enterprises. His laughter, filled with pride, echoed in the air, but it was the mention of Goldsmith Enterprises that truly caught my attention. The name was familiar, though I couldn't place it at first. Then, it clicked. As Mason continued to gloat, unaware of the humor I found in his bragging, I reflected on my life. My name is Patricia, and I'm 37 years old, living contentedly with my husband, Mason. I work in my family's real estate business, primarily handling administrative duties, while my father, the president, manages the company's broader strategies. As an only child, I'm expected to lead the company one day. Despite this looming responsibility, I've always strived to balance my personal and professional life, especially with Mason. Mason, who graduated high school and works at a moving company, has a physically demanding job I deeply respect. To avoid making him feel inadequate, I seldom mention my university degree or my anticipated future as company president. We met through a mutual friend during college after Mason's company helped her move. Initially, he was interested in her, but after she turned him down, we started to get to know each other. His laid-back demeanor complemented my meticulous nature, and our relationship blossomed. We married in our late 20s after a brief courtship, and his parents warmly embraced me, making my transition into his family seamless. For the most part, our marriage was smooth. Mason's demanding job often left him exhausted, but he remained devoted, even on his toughest days. He expressed gratitude when I stayed up to share dinner with him. I felt fortunate to have such a caring partner. However, after a year of marriage, cracks began to form in our once harmonious life. One night, as we prepared for bed, Mason unexpectedly brought up the topic of children. His tone, tinged with irritation, caught me off guard. While I also wanted children, I believed it would happen naturally with time. "It's only been a year, there's no rush," I reassured him. Despite my calm, Mason grew assertive, quoting statistics about the likelihood of conceiving within a year. The figure he mentioned seemed high, but I suggested a practical solution. "If you're concerned, maybe we should both get tested," I said, hoping to address any issues together. His reaction stunned me. "What are you implying? That it's my fault?" he snapped. "Usually, it's the woman's fault." His tone was laced with contempt. I was taken aback. I had never accused him of anything, yet Mason seemed intent on blaming me. "It's definitely the woman's fault," he added coldly, hurt and shaken. I could barely muster a reply. "Of course," I said softly, "so just you get tested. I'm too busy with work." His response was equally harsh. "I have a job too. You know, you're just coasting along in your dad's company." His words stung. While my role involved administrative tasks, I was actively learning from my father, preparing to lead the business. That night, any attempt at discussion was futile, and we fell asleep turned away from each other, a heavy silence lingering between us. Over time, Mason's attitude shifted drastically. One evening, after a long meeting with my father, I returned home to find him irate over dinner not being ready. "I'm sorry," I explained hastily. "I just got home 15 minutes ago. I'll start cooking now." But Mason dismissed my apology. Typical of a small company's boss's daughter, he scoffed, failing to grasp the scale of my father's enterprise, a significant real estate firm with hundreds of employees. His bitterness cast a shadow over our daily lives. That night, as I rushed to the kitchen, I suggested he relax with a drink while I cooked. Alcohol, though a temporary balm, had become a troubling staple in maintaining peace. It pained me to see our relationship reduced to this. The next morning, his cold demeanor persisted as he left for work, his parting words sharp, "Make sure dinner's ready." When I got home, I exhaled deeply, my mind focused on the day ahead. I had taken the day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, something Mason had insisted on, though he refused to participate himself. It was frustrating to face this alone, but complaining wouldn't change anything. If the problem lay with me, I was determined to start treatment immediately. Time was precious, fertility declines with age, and I wanted to address any issues without delay. The clinic was crowded, and I waited an hour before my examination. After a series of tests, the doctor explained that the results would be ready at my next appointment. The possibility that I might be the source of our fertility struggles was daunting, but I resolved to take whatever steps were necessary. When Mason came home that evening, I told him, "I went for the fertility test today." His response was as cutting as it was dismissive. "Figures if the problem's with you. It's good you're getting tested. Let me know the results." His assumption that I was solely to blame was hurtful, yet I held back my frustration, unwilling to escalate the tension. 6 years passed, and I turned 37. Our attempts to have a child remained unsuccessful, and Mason seemed to have resigned himself to the idea of never becoming a father. His late nights became more frequent, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he would casually explain that he'd been out drinking and singing karaoke until dawn. His behavior resembled that of a carefree college student rather than a committed husband, and it was increasingly infuriating. Meanwhile, my career demands grew, and I had to push the dream of starting a family aside. But Mason's actions were becoming intolerable. His disregard for our marriage was painfully evident. One day, on his day off, Mason left the house but forgot his smartphone in the living room. I picked it up to place it in our bedroom, but it rang just then. The caller ID displayed a name, Diana. Assuming she was a colleague, I answered to let her know Mason had left his phone at home. "Hey, Mason, you're late. I've been waiting for 50 minutes, hurry up, or we'll miss the park opening. We haven't had a date in so long," a flirtatious voice said. I froze, stunned. The mention of a date sent my heart racing. This woman wasn't just a colleague, she was someone Mason was seeing romantically. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone, disbelief and anger coursing through me. While I had been dealing with the weight of potential infertility, Mason had been carelessly engaging in an affair. His recent distance and indifference now made perfect, painful sense. Still holding his phone, I felt the urge to confirm my suspicions. Unlocking it using his birthdate, I scrolled through his call history and messages. The evidence was undeniable. His exchanges with Diana were full of affectionate and intimate words that turned my stomach. I meticulously documented everything, taking photos of the messages and call logs with my phone. Then, I placed his device back in its usual spot, acting as though nothing had changed. A month passed in this unsettling limbo. One day, my father, the president of our company, called me into his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said gravely. His tone made me brace for serious news, adding another layer of stress to my already overwhelming situation. That evening, Mason, perhaps sensing the inevitable, suggested we consider separating. His timing couldn't have been more convenient. I had already been preparing to address his infidelity and initiate a divorce. "Yes, let's divorce," I agreed quickly. Mason seemed taken aback by my readiness, perhaps expecting resistance. His relief, likely fueled by thoughts of a future with Diana, stung deeply. He handed me divorce papers the next day, which I signed without hesitation. "I'll file these tomorrow. I'll be leaving the house," he said nonchalantly. "Are you sure about the mortgage?" I asked, suspecting he hadn't fully considered his financial situation. His job, while demanding, wasn't lucrative enough to cover the payments alone, but I didn't feel any obligation to cushion his transition. A few days later, I moved back to my parents' house. They were initially concerned about my well-being but became furious when I revealed Mason's betrayal. Their support and reassurance helped solidify my decision to leave him behind. I threw myself into work, using my responsibilities to distract from the emotional wreckage of my failed marriage. A year passed in a whirlwind of projects and commitments. One evening, noticing how consumed and fatigued I'd become, my father suggested I take a break. "Why don't you take a trip? Things will only get busier next month," he said, his concern evident. Grateful for the suggestion, I decided to take a solo trip to the Northeast, craving peace and a change of scenery. The crisp air of the northeast was invigorating, cleansing my weary soul. The locals were kind and welcoming, their warmth slowly mending my spirit. Wanting to indulge in the best experience possible, I booked a stay in a renowned Los Angeles hotel for the final leg of my journey. After checking in, I settled into the lobby with a welcome drink, letting the fatigue of the past year melt away. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope for what lay ahead. The serene atmosphere of the hotel lobby wrapped around me as I sipped my drink, feeling a rare and precious sense of peace. I half-joked to myself about moving to Los Angeles when a familiar voice pierced through my thoughts. Huh? Hey, what are you doing here? I turned, startled, and my heart sank. It was Mason, my ex-husband, entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases. The last thing I expected on this journey of healing was to encounter him. Beside him was a young woman, likely in her early 20s, with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails. She wore a short skirt that seemed inappropriate for the chilly weather, but her confidence carried it off. Mason? I blurted out, disbelief clear in my voice. Who is she? Oh, let me introduce you, Mason said, grinning with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. This is Diana, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon, and guess what? She's the daughter of a wealthy businessman. Diana, the name hit me like a thunderclap. She was the same Diana from the phone call that had revealed Mason's betrayal. A wave of discomfort surged through me as Mason's pride in marrying someone young and rich became all too obvious. You're here alone? That's sad, Mason sneered, his words dripping with disdain. Diana smirked as she eyed me. Mason, is this your ex-wife? She asked, her tone sharp. She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in, she added, irritated. Mason draped an arm around her and laughed, a grating sound that broke the tranquility of the lobby. Yeah, I'm set for life now, marrying into money. Thanks for making the divorce so easy, Patricia, he said mockingly. Diana's dad is the head of Goldsmith Enterprises. They even paid off our house mortgage in a snap. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Goldsmith Enterprises? I said casually. Oh, I know them. Their main office is in that big building downtown, right? Mason looked momentarily surprised. You've been there? Yes, I replied evenly. That building is part of my father's real estate portfolio. He bought it recently for $500 million. He's mentioned them before. They're a tenant, though apparently not the best one. Mason and Diana exchanged puzzled glances. What do you mean? Diana asked, her confidence wavering. I let the silence linger for a moment before continuing. Goldsmith Enterprises has been late on their rent for months. My father was just talking about starting legal action if it doesn't get resolved. Diana's face paled. That's impossible. Our company is doing great, she stammered, her voice filled with doubt. I'm not making this up, I said calmly, pulling out my phone. I called my father and asked him to send over the most recent rent notice. Within moments, I showed them the document, which clearly listed Goldsmith Enterprises' overdue payments. Diana's bravado crumbled. Come to think of it, she murmured, Dad has been stressed lately, talking about slow sales and layoffs. Mason, however, exploded in denial. You're lying, you're just trying to ruin us. You've always been spiteful, he shouted, his accusations loud enough to draw glances from nearby guests. His words were a sharp echo of our troubled past, but this time, they didn't sting. Spiteful? I repeated, my tone steady. Mason, I have no reason to care about your life. You moved on, and so have I. I just feel sorry for Diana. Did you marry her for her money, just like you rushed into marriage with me to have kids? You always blame others for your problems, but here's the truth, I'm over you. Completely. Mason's face twisted with anger. Arrogant as ever, he spat. You can't even have kids. Diana and I are planning to start a family after this trip. I smiled faintly. Oh, I didn't mention it, did I? I'm 5 months pregnant. His jaw dropped. I remarried, I continued. My husband supports me in every way you never could. And for the record, Mason, I had no fertility issues. The clinic confirmed it years ago. If you're wondering why you and Diana haven't conceived, maybe you should take a hard look at yourself. The color drained from Mason's face. Does that mean his voice faltered. Diana's scorn flared. You're infertile? Why didn't you tell me, she snapped. Feeling no need to linger, I delivered my final words. Please settle the overdue rent soon, or we'll pursue legal action. Goodbye, Mason. As I walked away, their voices rose in an argument behind me. Back in my room, I felt a deep sense of closure. When I returned from the trip, my husband greeted me warmly. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to relax. I did, I replied, smiling. For the first time in years, I felt truly free from my past. Later, I learned through my father's connections that Goldsmith Enterprises had spiraled into financial ruin, mired in scandal and debt. Mason's dreams of luxury had crumbled as swiftly as they'd been built. My life, by contrast, was filled with new beginnings and genuine love. I had moved on, not just from Mason, but from the shadow he had cast over my life. It was another day in what had become a monotonous routine. I sat at the kitchen table, absently swirling a spoon in my half-drunk cup of coffee. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound accompanying me. My baby, barely 6 months old, slept soundly in the next room. I could hear the gentle rise and fall of his breathing on the baby monitor. He was my only anchor, my tiny beacon of light in a world that had grown increasingly dark. David, my husband, was upstairs packing for a trip to visit his parents, a trip I had no desire to take. The thought of being stuck in a car with him for hours, pretending we were a happy family, filled me with dread. Things between us had been tense for months. His dismissive attitude, his temper, and his complete lack of empathy had turned our marriage into a battlefield where I felt outnumbered and unarmed. I glanced at the calendar on the wall, the date circled in red, family visit. My stomach churned at the sight. I wanted to call it off, to tell David I wasn't feeling well, but I knew how he'd react. He'd accuse me of being selfish, of trying to ruin his plans. Just go along with it, I whispered to myself, though my heart screamed in protest. Lisa, are you packed yet? David's voice thundered down the stairs, sharp and impatient. I took a deep breath before answering. I'm not sure I should go, David. I'm feeling a bit off today. There was a pause before his footsteps pounded down the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of frustration. You're always feeling off. You'll be fine. Just rest in the car if you're tired. I tried to muster a response, but his dismissive tone cut me off before I could even start. He strode past me, grabbed my half-packed bag from the corner, and shoved it toward me. Come on, we're already running late. Reluctantly, I followed him to the car. As I settled into the passenger seat, I couldn't shake the gnawing unease in my chest. Something about today felt wrong. We were barely out of the driveway when it happened. A sharp, unmistakable gush of warmth spread down my legs. For a moment, I was frozen, trying to process what was happening. Then it hit me, my water had broken. David, I gasped, my water just broke. We need to go to the hospital, now. He slammed on the brakes, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Are you serious? Now? Yes, now, I snapped, panic rising in my voice. The baby's coming. Instead of springing into action, David muttered something under his breath, grabbed a towel from the back seat, and threw it at me. Clean it up, he said, his voice flat. Clean it up? I echoed in disbelief. David, this is serious, we have to go. He cut me off, throwing open his door and walking around to mine. Before I could comprehend what was happening, he yanked the passenger door open and barked. Get out. What? My voice cracked. Get out of the car, he yelled. You're going to ruin the seats. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled out of the car, clutching my belly. How could you do this? I'm your wife, and I'm having your child. He glared at me, his face twisted in annoyance. This isn't my fault. Lisa, you should have planned this better. Call an ambulance or something. And with that, he got back into the car, slammed the door, and drove away, leaving me alone on the side of the road. I stood there, stunned and trembling, watching the taillights disappear down the road. My phone felt like a lifeline in my pocket as I dialed for an ambulance, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. Before the operator could answer, a voice called out behind me. Lisa, are you okay? I turned to see Sarah, my neighbor, rushing toward me. She'd always been kind, but we'd never been particularly close. Yet in that moment, she looked like an angel sent to save me. My water broke. I managed to choke out between sobs. David, he left me here. Her face darkened with shock and fury, but her voice remained calm. We need to get you to the hospital. Come on. She helped me into her car, her movements careful but decisive. As she drove, she held my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. You're going to be okay, she said softly. I promise. When we arrived at the hospital, Sarah didn't leave my side. She stayed with me through the paperwork, through the hurried footsteps of nurses, and even as I was wheeled into a room, her presence was a steady comfort, like a lighthouse guiding me through the storm. My parents arrived not long after, their faces etched with worry. Sarah pulled them aside to explain what had happened, her voice low but firm. I watched from my hospital bed, my heart swelling with gratitude. This woman, who owed me nothing, had done more for me in a single day than David had in months. As the labor pains intensified, I made a silent vow. David would pay for what he'd done, not out of spite, but to protect my baby and myself. I wouldn't let him drag us down any longer. When I finally heard my baby's cries, relief and joy washed over me. I held him close, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine, and felt a surge of love stronger than anything I'd ever known. This was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was determined to write it on my own terms. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft whimpers of my newborn nestled in my arms. The exhaustion from labor weighed heavily on me, but I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of David, his callousness, his abandonment, and the cold, heartless way he had left me on the side of the road. I stared at the baby, his tiny fingers curling and uncurling as he drifted in and out of sleep. A deep sadness filled my chest, but there was also something else, resolve. He deserved better than the chaos David would bring into our lives, and so did I. The door creaked open, and Sarah peeked her head in, carrying a cup of tea. "How's my favorite little family?" she whispered, smiling warmly. I managed a weak smile. "We're okay, thanks to you." She set the tea down and pulled up a chair beside me. "Lisa, I've been thinking, you can't go back to him, not after this." I looked away, her words cutting too close to the truth. "I don't know where to start, Sarah, I don't even have a plan." "Start by knowing your worth," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." Later that afternoon, as I rested with the baby, the sound of raised voices outside my hospital room jolted me awake. My heart sank. I recognized David's voice. He barged in moments later, his expression unreadable. "Lisa," he began, his eyes darting between me and the baby, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I said, my voice sharp and unforgiving. "I think you said everything you needed to when you left me on the side of the road." David flinched, but quickly regained his composure. I panicked. "Okay, I made a mistake, but I'm here now. Let's just move past it." I stared at him in disbelief. "Move past it? David, you abandoned me during labor. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? What if something had happened to me or the baby?" He sighed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Lisa, you're blowing this out of proportion. I came to see my son, didn't I? Doesn't that count for something?" His son, not our son. The words stung, but they also clarified something for me. David didn't see us as a family, he saw us as obligations, burdens to be managed. I realized then that I couldn't stay in this marriage, not for another day. "You need to leave," I said firmly, my voice trembling but resolute. "What?" He blinked, caught off guard. "You're kicking me out of the hospital?" "Yes," I said, my grip tightening around my baby. "I don't want you here." For a moment, I thought he might argue, but he simply shrugged. "Fine, have it your way," as he stormed out. I felt a wave of relief mixed with a lingering sense of fear. I had stood up to him, but I knew this was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and overwhelming exhaustion. My parents stayed with me at the hospital, their quiet support a balm to my frayed nerves. They hadn't said much about David, but I could see the concern in their eyes. On the day of my discharge, my father pulled me aside. "Lisa," he said gently, "we're proud of you for standing up to David, but what's your plan now?" I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. "I'm going to file for separation," I said finally. "I can't go back to him, not after what he did." My father nodded, his expression both relieved and worried. "You know we're here for you, right? Whatever you need." Their support gave me strength, but I knew this was a battle I'd have to fight on my own. Returning to the house I had shared with David was out of the question. Instead, I moved in with my parents temporarily, setting up a nursery in the room I had grown up in. As I settled into this new phase of life, I started reaching out to lawyers and support groups. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. The weeks that followed were both challenging and rewarding. Every day was a balancing act, caring for my baby, managing my emotions, and navigating the legalities of separating from David. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of pure joy, like the first time my baby smiled at me, or the way he curled into my arms when he was sleepy. Sarah visited often, bringing meals and words of encouragement. "You're doing great," she said one afternoon as she rocked the baby to sleep. "I hope you know that. I don't feel great," I admitted. "Some days, I don't even feel like myself." "That's normal," she said, "but you're stronger than you think. You've already come so far." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. Just when I thought I was finding my footing, David reappeared, this time with demands. He showed up at my parents' house one evening, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. "You can't just take my son away from me," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I have rights." "No one's stopping you from being a father," I said, keeping my voice calm, "but you don't get to control me anymore." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're better off without me? You're nothing without me, Lisa." The words stung, but they didn't break me. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I'm everything without you." I shut the door in his face, my hands trembling. I knew this wasn't the end of his threats, but I also knew I wasn't the same scared, dependent woman he had once controlled. That night, as I held my baby close, I made a promise to him and to myself. I would fight for our future, no matter how difficult it was. I wouldn't let David's anger or manipulation dictate our lives. I began documenting everything, every interaction with David, every threat he made. My lawyer had advised me to keep detailed records, and I was determined to be prepared for whatever came next. At the same time, I leaned on the people who cared about me. My parents, Sarah, and the support group I had joined became my lifeline, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this battle. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild. Each small victory, a peaceful day, a milestone with the baby, was a step forward, and with every step, I felt my confidence grow. Life with my baby, whom I'd named Oliver, was a mix of exhaustion and wonder. Every coup, every tiny milestone, felt like a victory, a reminder of the life I was building for us. My days were consumed by caring for him, attending parenting classes, and working with my lawyer to navigate the separation. I was trying to create a semblance of normalcy, but David's shadow loomed large. He began calling incessantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic pleas to angry outbursts. I ignored most of them, forwarding anything threatening to my lawyer. One morning, as I sat in the living room feeding Oliver, my phone buzzed with another message from David. This one was different. "Lisa, I'm done playing nice. If you don't let me see my son, I'll make your life hell. You've been warned." The words sent a shiver down my spine. My lawyer assured me I was doing everything right, but David's unpredictability was a constant source of anxiety. One afternoon, during my first tentative visit back to the office, David showed up unannounced. He was waiting by the building entrance, his face twisted with frustration. "David, you can't be here," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear bubbling in my chest. "You're avoiding me," he accused. "You won't take my calls, and now you're keeping me from my son." "I'm not avoiding you," I said, stepping back as he moved closer. "I'm protecting Oliver. You abandoned us, David. You can't just show up and demand access." His voice rose, drawing the attention of a few coworkers. "He's my son too, Lisa. You don't get to make all the decisions." "Then take it to court," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "But stop harassing me." Before he could respond, security arrived, escorting him off the premises. The humiliation on his face was evident, but I didn't feel triumphant. If anything, I felt more trapped than ever. After the incident at work, my lawyer advised me to file for a restraining order. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Despite everything, part of me wanted to believe David could change, that he could be a better father than he had been a husband. But the threats, the unpredictable behavior, and the scene at my workplace left me with little choice. I had to prioritize Oliver's safety and my own. The court hearing was a nerve-wracking experience. David showed up with his lawyer, looking polished and composed, a stark contrast to the volatile man I knew. He painted himself as a devoted father, a man who had made mistakes but deserved a chance to be in his son's life. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts, the abandonment during labor, the threats, the harassment. My lawyer presented the voicemails and documented incidents, painting a clear picture of David's behavior. The judge granted the restraining order, restricting David's contact with me and allowing supervised visits with Oliver. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step forward. With the restraining order in place, a sense of relief settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Oliver and I fell into a new rhythm, surrounded by love and support from my family and friends. One evening, Sarah invited me to a small gathering at her house. It was a chance to unwind, to remember that I was more than just a mother navigating a messy separation. Among the guests was Daniel, a mutual friend of Sarah's. He was kind, with an easy smile and a warmth that felt disarming. We struck up a conversation, sharing stories about work and life. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made my chest feel lighter. As the night went on, I found myself drawn to him. There was no pressure, no expectations, just a simple connection that felt refreshing. The peace didn't last long. A week after the gathering at Sarah's, I received a letter from David's lawyer. He was contesting the custody arrangements, seeking joint custody of Oliver. The thought of sharing parenting responsibilities with David was unbearable. "He's trying to get back at me," I told my lawyer during a tense meeting. "This isn't about Oliver, it's about control." "I believe you," she said, "but we need to focus on the evidence. If we can prove that joint custody isn't in Oliver's best interest, the court will side with you." The thought of another legal battle was exhausting, but I knew I couldn't back down. Oliver deserved stability, not the chaos David would bring into his life. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing were some of the hardest I'd faced. David's legal team dug into every aspect of my life, trying to paint me as an unfit mother. They questioned my decision to live with my parents, my ability to balance work and motherhood, even my brief interaction with Daniel. Through it all, I held on to the support of the people around me, my parents, Sarah, and even Daniel, who had become a steady presence in my life, reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight. The hearing was tense and emotional. Both sides presented their arguments, but in the end, the court ruled in my favor. David was granted limited visitation, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough. After the hearing, I sat in the car with my lawyer, tears streaming down my face. They were a mix of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude. The fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, but I had proven to myself that I could stand up for Oliver and for me. When I got home that evening, I found Daniel waiting on the porch. He didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug that felt like home. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said softly. "Oliver's lucky to have you." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. The days following the custody ruling brought a rare stillness to my life. The weight of the legal battle lifted, leaving space for me to reflect on everything that had transpired. I spent hours with Oliver, marveling at the tiny miracles of his growth, his first tooth, the way he reached for me when he needed comfort, the small giggles that seemed to erase the darkest days. He was my reason for everything, my light in every storm. David's supervised visits began soon after. I felt a pang of anxiety each time I handed Oliver over to the court-appointed monitor, but the arrangement offered me a sense of control. I knew Oliver would be safe, and that was enough. One evening, as I rocked Oliver to sleep, I thought about the person I had been before all this, a young woman brimming with dreams, but uncertain of her strength. Life had tested me in ways I never expected, but I'd emerged stronger, more sure of who I was and what I deserved. My friendship with Daniel continued to blossom. He wasn't just a source of support, he became someone I looked forward to seeing, someone who reminded me that joy still existed, even in the aftermath of chaos. One Saturday, he invited me and Oliver to a park. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that made the world feel brighter. Daniel brought a blanket and a basket of snacks, and we spent hours under the shade of a tree, talking and laughing while Oliver napped in my arms. "You've been through so much," Daniel said, his voice gentle, "but you're still standing. That's incredible." "I didn't have a choice," I said. "Oliver needed me." He smiled, his gaze warm. "And you've been there for him every step of the way. But you deserve happiness too, Lisa." His words stayed with me long after we left the park. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival, a future that included love and laughter. David's visits were uneventful at first, but over time, he began to change. He started sending small gifts for Oliver, leaving notes apologizing for his past behavior. I remained wary, but I couldn't ignore the effort he was making. One afternoon, after a particularly peaceful visit, David asked to speak with me. "I know I've been a terrible husband and father," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to be better for Oliver." His words stirred a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that he could change, but another part of me remembered the pain he'd caused, the sleepless nights, and the fear. "I appreciate the effort you're making," I said carefully, "but trust takes time. If you're serious about being there for Oliver, prove it with your actions." It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step toward understanding, a fragile bridge between the past and the future. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. David continued his supervised visits, slowly earning the court's trust. While our relationship remained distant, we found a way to co-parent with civility. Meanwhile, my bond with Daniel deepened. He wasn't just a friend anymore, he was someone I could lean on, someone who made me feel safe. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Daniel stayed for dinner. As we sat on the couch, talking about everything and nothing, he reached for my hand. "Lisa," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I know you've been through so much. I don't want to rush anything, but I care about you. I care about Oliver, and I want to be here for both of you, if you'll let me." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "I'd like that," I whispered. It wasn't a grand declaration or a sweeping romance, it was quiet and real, built on trust and understanding. On Oliver's first birthday, I threw a small party at my parents' house. It was a celebration of not just his life, but everything we'd overcome together. Friends and family gathered in the backyard, showering Oliver with love and laughter. David showed up briefly, bringing a small, thoughtful gift for Oliver, a handmade photo album filled with pictures of their visits. He stayed just long enough to share a moment with his son before quietly leaving, giving me a small nod of acknowledgement as he went. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was enough. David was trying, and that mattered. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I stood in the quiet house, holding Oliver as he drifted off to sleep. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the heartbreak, the challenges, the unexpected moments of grace. I wasn't the same person I'd been a year ago. I was stronger, more resilient, and more certain of my worth. Life hadn't unfolded the way I'd imagined, but in its messiness and beauty, it had given me everything I needed. As I put Oliver in his crib and turned off the light, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I could handle it. I had my son, my family, and the beginnings of a new love. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Life in the urban sprawl as a police officer doesn't just toughen you, it encases you in a shell of skepticism so thick it might as well be Kevlar. That was me, Emma, a 37-year-old former lieutenant turned private detective. I carried a suitcase of mistrust heavier than the cases I cracked, my daily grind orbiting around unfaithful partners and the art of deception, hardly the backdrop for a romantic tale. Then Bobby strolled into my life, a beacon of modern artistry, refreshing my world like a vibrant brushstroke on a faded mural. We crossed paths at an art exhibition in Philadelphia, surrounded by enthusiasts tossing around terms like postmodern and avant-garde with effortless poise. I, however, felt as out of place as a fish trying to pedal a bicycle. "Intriguing piece, isn't it?" Bobby said, his gaze fixed on what looked like a strategically arranged heap of junk. "If by intriguing, you mean I've seen tidier trash heaps, then absolutely," I quipped. His laugh, deep and resonant, turned heads. That laugh, and the man it belonged to, swept me into a whirlwind romance. Fast forward 7 months, and I was utterly smitten. Bobby was a dapper gentleman who seemed plucked from a bygone era, charming me with poetry readings, exquisite art shows, and an attention that made me feel like the only woman alive. Beneath a starlit sky in Central Park, he proposed. My yes came without hesitation, my heart pounding with sheer joy. The engagement was blissful, a haze of love and daydreams about a future brimming with laughter, adventure, and maybe children, but as the saying goes, if something seems too good to be true. Enter Marilyn, Bobby's mother, the epitome of frostiness. She scrutinized me with the air of someone inspecting a blemish on fine china. "A detective? Isn't that a tad unladylike?" she asked during our first dinner together. "That depends on which century your ideals are anchored in," I replied, earning a tense smile from Bobby. Her visits grew more frequent, each one an audit of our burgeoning life together. 3 weeks into our marriage, she appeared unannounced one chilly Tuesday evening. Her disdain was as palpable as the cold outside. "Emma, darling," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "still clinging to that quaint little job of yours? I had hoped marriage would refine you into a proper lady." I was slicing vegetables for dinner, the knife suddenly tempting for uses beyond the culinary. "Marilyn, where I come from, we call this earning a living. You might try it sometime instead of leeching off others," I said, my voice steady. Her lips pursed, but she maintained her poised demeanor. Bobby was raised with certain expectations. "Emma, there's still time for you to choose a more respectable career. Something like full-time meddling?" I shot back, my tone sharp. "Thanks, but I'll stick to tracking unfaithful spouses and deceivers. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club treating you?" Bobby entered just then, his impeccable timing diffusing the tension. though his arrival didn't stop Marilyn's passive-aggressive commentary. "Your wife has quite the flair for sharp remarks," she said sweetly. "Mom," Bobby sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Emma's career is part of who she is. Can we not do this right now?" I swallowed my irritation and turned back to the chopping board, letting the argument simmer with the vegetables. After Marilyn's visits, Bobby retreated into a shell of silence that I couldn't penetrate. It was painfully clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One particularly tense evening, after Marilyn had criticized everything from my cooking to my housekeeping, I confronted him. "Why don't you ever stand up for me?" I demanded. "Your mother treats me like I'm invisible, and you just let her. Is this what our marriage is supposed to be?" Bobby looked weary. "Emma, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do? Cut her off?" "No, I want you to support me, to tell her she can't bulldoze over us." "Is that asking too much?" He sighed, raking his fingers through his hair. "I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it some time. She'll adjust." But she didn't. Neither did he. The distance between us grew, widened by Marilyn's coldness and Bobby's passivity, creating a chasm that felt impossible to bridge. Living with Bobby started to feel like being part of a melodrama, where the cracks in our perfect facade began to show. He worked at a prestigious art gallery, an impressive-sounding role until you considered how erratic his earnings were. Meanwhile, my detective work provided a comfortable lifestyle in a stylish apartment. One evening, as we discussed our future over dinner, I brought up the idea of eventually buying a house, envisioning the space we'd need if we planned to start a family. Bobby paused, his fork hovering midair, and looked at me quizzically. "Emma, where are you getting these ideas? We don't need a house, and me finding a new job isn't on the agenda." I set my fork down, trying to maintain a calm tone. "It's not about need, Bobby, it's about planning for our future. A stable income would certainly help." He chuckled, a sound that used to warm my heart but now grated against my patience. "You and your fixation on money," he said lightly. "You always focus on the financial bottom line, don't you? Money isn't everything, Emma." His laughter pushed me to the edge. "It's easy for you to say when you're not the one stressed about paying the bills each month. I'm not fixated on money, Bobby." He shrugged dismissively and returned to his meal as if we were merely discussing the weather. "I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied." I stood, my appetite gone. "Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than just critiques about how I manage ours." He didn't even glance up. "I contribute in other ways, Emma. Not everything is about money." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. This wasn't just about buying a house, planning for kids, or finances. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which Bobby seemed to value. As long as his life remained comfortable, he dismissed my concerns as an obsession with money, sidestepping the real issues between us. On a seemingly ordinary Sunday, our living room became an impromptu stage for high drama when Marilyn, my not-so-favorite mother-in-law, dropped by unannounced. The air grew tense as she remained glued to her phone, her voice wavering between panic and confusion. "And you're telling me my social security number has been suspended? How much do I need to pay to fix this?" Marilyn's voice cracked as she rummaged through her purse for her checkbook and documents. In the kitchen, coffee in hand, I overheard her mention Social Security and payments. Years of police work had sharpened my instincts, and alarm bells rang in my head. This was a scam. I hurried into the living room, my approach quiet but quick. "Marilyn, hang up the phone. It's a scam," I interjected, my tone firm but calm. She turned to me, shocked and offended. "I beg your pardon? I'm handling this, Emma. There's no need for your intrusion." Before she could protest further, I stepped forward and ended the call with a decisive click. Silence enveloped the room, thick with tension. Marilyn recoiled, her face twisting into an expression of fury and disbelief. "How dare you? That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child?" Bobby appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. His expression was a mix of concern and frustration. "Emma, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother?" I turned to him, my frustration mounting. "That call was from scammers, Bobby. They were trying to con Marilyn out of her money by claiming her social security number was suspended. It's a common tactic. I've seen it 100 times." Bobby rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I recognized as him feeling cornered. "Okay, but couldn't you have been more diplomatic about it?" Marilyn, gathering her belongings with shaking hands, shot me a look sharp enough to curdle milk. "I don't need to be saved, Especially not by someone who treats me with such disrespect. I'll speak to the bank about this so-called scam. She stormed out, leaving a chilly silence behind. Bobby sighed, his gaze shifting between the door and me. Emma, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother. I felt a twinge of guilt but stood my ground. I know it seemed harsh, but there wasn't time for polite exchanges. Scammers thrive on urgency, and any hesitation could have cost Marilyn dearly. The next day, still feeling a mix of curiosity and guilt, I decided to call her. After 3 rings, she picked up, her voice cold and measured. What do you want, Emma? I cleared my throat. I just wanted to check on you after yesterday. Did you speak with the bank about that call? There was a pause before she reluctantly admitted. Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. Her tone hardened. But that doesn't excuse how you handled things. You were rude and aggressive. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. I'm sorry if I seemed harsh. I was just trying to protect you. These scammers are professional deceivers and very convincing. Her reply was curt, laced with begrudging gratitude. Well, I suppose I should thank you for stopping me from making a mistake, but don't think this changes my view of your methods or your demeanor. Goodbye, Emma. The tension between Bobby and me deepened, turning our home from a warm sanctuary into a chilly battlefield. Clinging to hope, I saw his upcoming birthday as an opportunity to rekindle the fading spark in our relationship. I meticulously planned a weekend getaway just for the two of us, dreaming of restoring what we once had. However, Marilyn bulldozed through my plans with her own, scheduling a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, fully aware my work schedule was overflowing. I pleaded with her over the phone. Can't we push it to Saturday? I'm swamped at work. Her voice was a blend of syrup and frost. No, dear, this is when it's happening. Bobby shouldn't have to adjust his birthday to fit around your job. Frustration gnawed at me as I confided in my boss, a veteran of countless betrayals and deceptions. He understood the importance of gestures. Go, he urged, giving me a knowing look. Do what you need to do. Arriving at Marilyn's, the party was already in full swing, an ostentatious display of pretense. Marilyn spotted me immediately, her smile tightening as she whispered something to Bobby. There he was, my husband, ensconced by the fireplace, his arm casually draped around a woman who was more than just a colleague. My heart sank, but I steeled myself and approached them. Aren't you going to introduce me? I tried to keep my voice steady, though my emotions churned. Bobby, aren't you going to introduce me? He flinched, his eyes widening in shock. Emma, this is Lori, from the gallery, he muttered, glancing nervously at her before turning to me. And this is Emma, a relative. The words hit me like a slap. A relative? My voice rose before I could stop it. Your wife, Bobby, or have you conveniently forgotten? The room fell silent, the tension crackling like static electricity. Bobby's expression twisted, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation. You know, he snapped, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority. He turned away dismissively, his words cutting deeper than I thought possible. Before I could respond, Marilyn appeared, her voice dripping with disdain. You see, Emma, you just don't fit in here. Bobby needs someone supportive, like Lori, not, whatever this is. She gestured vaguely at me, her disdain unmistakable. Her next words were cold and biting. I think it's best if you leave. You're not wanted here. I stood frozen for a moment, Marilyn's venomous words echoing in my ears. Then, I straightened my spine and met her gaze with all the strength I could muster. You're right, Marilyn. I don't belong in a family built on lies and deception. With as much dignity as I could gather, I walked out, the chill of the night air wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. After the debacle of Bobby's birthday and the revelations that followed, I knew I needed undeniable proof to sever this marriage on my terms, but the idea of uncovering Bobby's betrayal myself was unbearable. I reached out to Alan, a trusted colleague with a knack for uncovering discreet affairs. Alan, I said, my voice barely steady, I need a favor. Anything for you, he replied without hesitation. What's going on? It's Bobby. I think he's seeing someone. I need evidence, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. Say no more, Alan assured me. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have everything you need. He was true to his word. The evidence he gathered was damning. Photos, audio, and more. Lori wasn't just a fling. She was here illegally, seeking a quick marriage to secure her status. She and Bobby had even been involved in fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Bobby with the evidence, but I knew better. He didn't deserve my anger, my pain, or my time. Filing for divorce was painful but necessary, like tearing off a band-aid over a festering wound. I demanded financial compensation, just a fraction of what I had lost emotionally and financially during our marriage. Marilyn, ever the dragon lady, sided with Bobby, painting me as the villain, but armed with the evidence, I stood my ground. When the papers were signed, I felt an overwhelming sense of release. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new life. I poured my energy into opening my detective agency, turning my pain into purpose. The agency thrived quickly, building a reputation for discretion and effectiveness. It was a reflection of everything I'd learned, the lies, the betrayals, and the resilience I had cultivated. Every case was a small victory, a piece of myself healing as I helped others uncover their own truths. One morning, as I sifted through files, Alice, my right-hand woman, peeked into my office. "Boss, we've got a potential case. A woman suspects her husband is having an affair." I smiled, the irony not lost on me. "Sounds like our bread and butter. What's the catch?" "She's on a tight budget," Alice said. I thought for a moment. This was my chance to help someone like the person I used to be. "We'll work with her budget," I decided. "And Alice, let's make sure we're thorough. I know all too well what it's like to be on the other side of this." Life has a way of coming full circle. A week after Marilyn's surprise visit to my agency, my phone buzzed with a number I thought I'd erased. Seeing Bobby's name flash on the screen felt surreal. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Emma," he began, his voice carrying a blend of hope and desperation. "I've been thinking. I want us to start over, have kids, build a future together." I snorted, unable to hold back my disbelief. "Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours?" "With my mom, at first," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We'll save money, and then you can buy us a house. It'll be perfect." This time, I laughed, loud and unrestrained. "You really haven't changed, Bobby. You still think I exist to clean up your messes and fund your dreams." "Emma, please," he stammered. "I've changed. We can fix this." I paused, reflecting on the years I had wasted and the strength I had found since leaving him. Then, with a calm I hadn't known before, I said, "No, Bobby, you haven't changed. Goodbye." Hanging up felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd long since finished. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. As I returned to my work, I felt a surge of purpose. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out like a blank canvas, ready for me to paint with bold, vibrant strokes. Life's best revenge is living well, and I was fully committed to doing just that. The black dress feels wrong against my skin as I stand before my 7-year-old son's casket. Wrong because Nathan should be here, holding my hand, sharing this unbearable weight. Wrong because parents shouldn't outlive their children. And wrong, so profoundly wrong, because while I bury our son, my husband is in Hawaii with his mistress. I know this because a photo landed on my phone 10 minutes ago. Nathan, tan and grinning, a cocktail in hand, his arm draped around a blonde who can't be older than 30. Below it, the message read, "Thought you should see what your husband's really doing today. A concerned friend." My mother's hand tightens around my arm. "Gabrielle, you're shaking." She's right. The phone trembles in my grip until I shove it into my purse, its weight pressing against me like the judgmental eyes of the mourners around us. Whispers ripple through the small chapel. Secrets spread fast in our town, and Nathan's glaring absence at his own son's funeral will fuel gossip for months. "I'll kill him," my mother mutters, her voice low and trembling with fury. "That bastard. I'll kill him with my bare hands." The small, white coffin gleams under the chapel lights, draped in a blanket of roses, Lucas's favorite. He loved how food coloring could transform their pale petals into vivid blues and purples. We spent hours in the hospital together, conducting experiments just to see him smile through the pain. Nathan's parents linger near the edge of the crowd, their expressions carefully neutral. Linda, my mother-in-law, meets my gaze briefly before turning away. She knows. She's probably always known. The funeral director approaches, clipboard in hand. "Are we ready to begin?" I want to scream that I'm not ready, that none of this is right. Lucas should be home playing video games, begging for 5 more minutes before bedtime. Instead, I nod and take my place in the front pew. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's a message from Nathan himself. "Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. We'll make it up to you." A wave of rage washes over me, scorching away my grief for one fleeting moment and leaving behind something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I delete the message and sit up straighter. Let him enjoy his Hawaiian paradise with his cheap mistress. Let him think he's won. That I'll crumble under the weight of my grief like a dutiful, broken widow. He's wrong. I'm going to destroy him, not just for abandoning Lucas during his illness, not just for missing his funeral, but for every lie, every betrayal, every selfish moment when he put himself first. Piece by piece, I'll take everything from him until he understands what true loss feels like. The reception at my parents' house feels like a staged play, everyone performing their assigned roles. In the kitchen, Linda corners me, her manicured nails digging into my arm just a little too hard. "Nathan's going through a difficult time," she says, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "We all process grief differently." I shake her off, focusing instead on arranging cookies that no one will eat onto a serving tray. Is that what we're calling it now? Processing grief in Hawaii? Her lips press into a thin line. "You've always had a flair for dramatics, Gabrielle. Perhaps if you'd been more understanding during Lucas's illness." "Don't you dare." My mother's voice slices through the room, sharp and unyielding. She steps into the doorway, and I've never seen her look so furious. "Don't you dare blame my daughter for your son's cowardice." Linda stiffens, her composure slipping for the briefest moment. "Margaret, this is hardly the time." "It's exactly the time." My mother closes the distance between them, her smaller frame somehow towering over Linda's. "While my daughter was sleeping in hospital chairs for months, where was Nathan? While my grandson fought for his life, where were you and Robert, with your family support?" The sound of shattering porcelain interrupts her tirade. I've crushed a cookie in my fist, crumbs scattering across the counter. In the living room, my father asks a guest about his newspaper for the third time in 10 minutes, oblivious to the storm brewing in the kitchen. "We contributed financially," Linda says stiffly, her voice laced with condescension, which is more than I can say for some people. My mother laughs, a cold, bitter sound. "Oh yes, your precious money. Tell me, Linda, does Nathan know about the trust fund yet? The one Robert's father left specifically for his great-grandchildren?" Linda's face goes pale. This is the first I'm hearing of any trust fund, but it's clear from her reaction that this information wasn't meant for me. "That's a family matter," she hisses. "Lucas was family," I say quietly, the pieces falling into place. He was the only great-grandchild. That money was his. The tension in the kitchen becomes suffocating as Linda's perfectly composed mask begins to crack, revealing something dark and calculating beneath. All those times she discouraged Nathan from spending time with Lucas. All those business trips she conveniently arranged during his hospital stays. It wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate. "I think you should leave," my mother says, her voice ice cold. But Linda's already retreating, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like tiny hammers driving nails into the foundation of my growing rage. I turn to my mother, my voice tight. "Tell me everything about that trust fund." Her smile is grim, filled with years of quiet fury. "Oh, sweetheart, that's just the beginning of what I have to tell you." 3 days after the funeral, I find the life insurance papers in Nathan's home office, not tucked away in a drawer or neatly filed, but scattered across his desk like discarded leaves, forms, receipts, and a post-it note scribbled with "Call Samurai policy" in his hasty handwriting. My hands tremble as I sift through the papers. Then I see it, Lucas's life insurance policy, taken out 6 months after his diagnosis, $2 million. My breath catches as my eyes land on the beneficiary line, Nathan Thompson, sole recipient. My name has been crossed out. The change dated mere weeks before Lucas died. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Coffee shop on Main, now. Samantha." The name hits like a slap. Sam, the woman in the Hawaii photo, the same Sam from the post-it note. I find her exactly where she said she'd be, looking polished and expensive in a way that reeks of someone else's money. She doesn't stand as I approach, only stirs her coffee with calculated precision. "I'm surprised you came," she says without looking up. "And I'm surprised you had the nerve to contact me." Now she looks up, her gaze hard. "Nathan's been promising me things, big things, but now he's not returning my calls." "What kind of things?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want the answer. "A fresh start, a new life together." Her laugh is bitter. "Funded by your son's insurance money." The room tilts sideways, and I grip the edge of the table to steady myself. "He told you about that?" "He tells me everything." She pulls out her phone and scrolls through messages, including how he made sure you'd never see a penny of it. His mother's idea. Apparently, she never thought you deserved their family money. "Why are you telling me this?" She leans forward, her voice sharp. Because he's playing both of us. That policy? He promised to split it with me, but I did some digging. He's got gambling debts. Gabrielle, big ones. The kind that make people desperate. My throat is dry. You're lying. Samantha slides her phone across the table. Text messages, bank statements, photos, a digital trail of betrayal spanning months. Nathan and Linda plotting, Nathan and Samantha planning, Nathan at casinos, with loan sharks, at places he had no business being while our son was dying. I'm not the villain here, Samantha says quietly. I'm just another mark in his con, but unlike you, I've got nothing left to lose. I stand, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're wrong about one thing, I have nothing left to lose either. Samantha smiles, all teeth. Then maybe we should help each other. I look at her, the woman who helped destroy my family, and realize she might be exactly what I need, a weapon aimed straight at Nathan's heart. Later, I find my father sitting in Lucas's room, holding a worn stuffed penguin. It went with Lucas to every hospital stay, his comfort through endless treatments. You look just like your mother when she's planning something dangerous, he says, his voice unusually clear. I sink onto the bed beside him, the mattress still indented from where Lucas spent his final weeks. Dad, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? He strokes the penguin's matted fur. No, but I remember Lucas telling me about the trust fund. His brow furrows. Was that real? My heart skips. What trust fund, Dad? The one Nathan's father wanted to discuss. Robert came here when Lucas was sick, said something about protecting family assets. His gaze drifts. Did I dream that? I take his hand, steadying my voice, despite the storm inside me. No, Dad, when exactly was this? Your mother was at the hospital with Lucas. Robert brought papers. His grip tightens, surprisingly strong. I didn't sign them. They felt wrong, like when you smell smoke but can't see the fire. The pieces click into place. Robert's unexpected visit, Linda's manipulations, Nathan's sudden interest in our family's property. It wasn't just about Lucas's insurance money. They were after everything. My phone buzzes again, a message from Samantha. Nathan's back, meeting with his lawyer tomorrow, something about property transfers. I should have protected you better, my father says, his voice cracking. Both of you. You did, Dad, I whisper, gripping his hand, by not signing those papers. I stand, my decision crystallizing, and now it's my turn. He holds out the penguin. Lucas knew. He told me not to worry about you because you're stronger than everyone thinks. His eyes cloud over. Who's Nathan? The familiar ache of watching him slip away mingles with a new, fiery determination. I take the penguin, its soft weight anchoring me to this moment. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's Uncle Peter. Found something in the property records. Come to my office, now. I kiss my father's forehead. I have to go, Dad, but I promise you, they won't take anything else from this family. Uncle Peter's office is a fortress of filing cabinets and legal documents, but what he shows me isn't buried in a drawer. It's on his computer, a series of property transfers dating back to when Lucas first got sick. They've been planning this for months, Peter says, scrolling through document after document, shell companies, hidden accounts, all leading back to Nathan and his parents. My fingers trace the dates on the screen. Each one aligns with a hospital stay, a chemotherapy session, a day when I was too consumed with saving Lucas to notice what Nathan was doing. Here's the kicker, Peter continues, pulling up another file. They used Lucas's medical bills to justify emergency sales of your joint assets. Everything's been quietly moved into accounts you can't access. A knock at the door startles us. It's Samantha, looking less polished than before. Sorry to interrupt, but Nathan's meeting got moved up. He's at the lawyer's office now. Peter glances at his watch. That's not possible. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. It was, Samantha says. Linda changed it. They're signing everything over today. Once it's done, she lets the sentence hang. My phone buzzes, a text from Nathan. We need to talk about the house, coming by later. The house, my parents' house, the place where my father still lives, the place where Lucas spent his final days, the property that's been in my family for generations. I square my shoulders. Show me everything. For the next hour, Peter and I sift through every document, every transfer, and every carefully constructed lie. Rage simmers beneath my calm exterior as we unravel Nathan's trail of gambling debts hidden behind corporate facades. Linda's systematic dismantling of our joint assets, and Robert's attempts to manipulate my father into signing away his rights. There's one more thing, Samantha says quietly, pulling out her phone. She presses play on a recording. Nathan's voice fills the room, discussing with Linda how they could use my father's condition to their advantage. The words echo like nails driven into a coffin, sealing away any lingering doubts. The recording ends, leaving only silence. In that silence, I hear Lucas's voice in my memory. Promise you won't let them take our home, Mom. We can stop them, Peter says, but we have to act now. I stand, gathering the documents we've printed. No, I'm not just going to stop them. I reach into my bag, pulling out Lucas's worn penguin and setting it on Peter's desk. I'm going to take everything back, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone else again. A faint smile curves Samantha's lips. I was hoping you'd say that. I know exactly where they've hidden the real estate contracts. Get your coat, I tell Peter, a fiery resolve building inside me. We're going to Nathan's lawyer's office, and this time, I'm not leaving without what's mine. The penguin watches silently as the three of us, unlikely allies forged by betrayal, step into the night. The lawyer's office feels cold, a calculated stage set for confrontation. Nathan sits across the polished conference table, flanked by Linda and Robert. Between us lies a thick stack of documents, a fortress of their deceit. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Nathan says, sliding the papers toward me. Just sign, for Lucas. My hand clenches around the USB drive in my pocket, the drive containing every piece of evidence Peter and I painstakingly gathered, fraudulent documents, recorded conversations, and an irrefutable paper trail. Don't you dare say his name, I bite out. Linda leans forward, her manicured nails tapping against the table in feigned sympathy. Gabrielle, dear, you're clearly not thinking clearly. Grief can make people. Her words are cut off by Samantha's sharp voice. Show them. She strides in, followed by Peter, her phone already in hand. Nathan pales. What is she doing here? Connecting the USB to the lawyer's computer, I watch the projector flicker to life. One by one, the evidence scrolls across the screen: property transfers, falsified signatures, and recordings of Nathan and Linda plotting to exploit my father's dementia. It's over, I say. Nathan's smile freezes me. Actually, he pulls out another folder, tossing it onto the table. The photographs inside make my stomach drop. Peter meeting with known criminals, bank statements showing questionable transfers, and emails hinting at tax fraud. Imagine how damaging this would be for your family, Linda says softly, her tone venomous. Your uncle's business destroyed, your mother implicated, your father uprooted from his home. Peter starts to protest, but Nathan cuts him off. We can make this all go away, or we can destroy everything you have left. Your choice. The room spins as every carefully laid plan crumbles before me. They weren't just stealing, they'd built their own insurance policy against exposure. Nathan stands, his tone smug. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Choose wisely. They leave, their threats hanging heavy in the air. The projector continues cycling through the evidence, now a testament to a battle I'm no longer certain I can win. They won't stop, Samantha whispers. They'll take everything, piece by piece. I stare at the last image on the screen, Lucas in the hospital, smiling weakly. Nathan, as always, was nowhere to be found. No, I say, my voice steady. They won't take anything else, not from me. It's time we stop playing their game. We're changing the rules. That night, my mother's kitchen transforms into a war room. Documents cover every surface as Margaret, my mother, lays out her own secret cache of evidence, years of surveillance, bank statements, and recorded conversations. I've been tracking Nathan's schemes since Lucas's first hospital stay, she explains. I knew something wasn't right when he started pressuring your father about the property titles. Peter studies one of the documents, his face lighting up. These transfers, they're legally binding, but they're not what Nathan thinks they are. A knock at the door makes us freeze. Samantha steps inside, her phone recording. They're on their way. Linda convinced Nathan, tonight's the night to force your hand. Perfect timing, my mother says, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Peter pulls up more files. Every property Nathan tried to steal, every asset he thought he owned, all legally transferred into a trust in Lucas's name. How? I whisper. Your father had more clear days than they realized, Margaret says. We made sure everything was properly signed and notarized during those moments. Nathan was too busy creating fake documents to notice the real ones. Headlights sweep across the windows, and car doors slam. "Remember," Peter says, his voice urgent. "Let them think they're in control." When Nathan bursts in, his smile is triumphant, until Samantha presses play on her phone. The recordings play, Nathan and Linda confessing to fraud, discussing how to manipulate my father, and plotting every move. "You set us up," Nathan snarls, lunging forward. "No," I say, my voice cold. "You set yourself up. Every fake document, every fraudulent transfer, they've already been sent to the FBI." Linda reaches for her folder of threats, but my mother snatches it. "Looking for these?" she asks, her tone steel. "Funny thing about evidence, it works both ways." Nathan's face twists in rage. "You can't." "I already have." I cut him off. "The only question now is how far you want to take this, because I'm ready to lose everything to make sure you lose more." The silence that follows is deafening. The next morning, as frost crunches beneath my feet, I visit Lucas's grave. I set his penguin against the stone, its familiar weight grounding me. "You'd be proud, Lucas," I whisper. "We protected what mattered." My father joins me, more lucid than usual. "Lucas told me not to worry about you. He said you'd find your strength." I smile softly. "Did he?" He nods, touching the penguin. "Funny thing about strength, it sometimes looks like revenge, but it's really just love wearing armor." The weight of everything, the battles, the loss, the hard-won justice, settles on my shoulders. It isn't triumph, it's survival. As we turn to leave, a monarch butterfly flutters onto Lucas's headstone, its wings glowing like stained glass. "Let it be," I tell my father as he reaches for it. The butterfly takes flight, free and unburdened, and for the first time, I understand what it means to let go.
The conference room at First National Bank felt colder than usual as I reviewed the security footage for the fourth time. Even after 20 viewings, seeing my brother Marcus walk up to the teller still made my stomach turn. "Are you sure you want a copy of this, Miss Thompson?" asked Mr. Reeves, the bank's security director. His expression was a mixture of sympathy and professional detachment. "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "And the transaction records for the last 6 months, please." I had built my life on being careful. At 34, I was a senior financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, known for triple-checking every decimal point. My colleagues joked that I was the human calculator, precise, reliable, impossible to fool. But somehow, I'd missed this betrayal happening right under my nose. 6 months ago, when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer, I didn't hesitate. I transferred $75,000 from my personal savings to a dedicated medical expense account. "Use it for whatever she needs," I told Marcus, who lived closer to home and handled Mom's day-to-day care. "Just keep me updated on the treatments." Every week, he sent detailed texts. "Mom's starting a new round of chemo. The doctors are optimistic. She's responding well to treatment." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my little brother, the one I'd helped raise after Dad died when we were kids. I paid for his college textbooks, covered his first apartment's security deposit, even co-signed his car loan. But last Tuesday, during my monthly call with Mom, everything unraveled. "The pain is getting worse," she mentioned casually. "But the hospital won't schedule another round until we make a payment arrangement." My teacup had slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. "What payment arrangement?" "I sent $75,000 for your treatment." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Honey," Mom said slowly, "we never received any money." That's how I found myself at First National Bank at 8 a.m. on a Thursday, watching security footage from March 15th. The timestamp showed 2:14 p.m. as Marcus approached the teller, holding a power of attorney document I'd never seen. 20 minutes later, he walked out with a cashier's check for the entire amount. The funds were deposited into an account at Pacific West, Mr. Reeves explained, sliding a transaction report across the table. Would you like us to contact the fraud department? I shook my head, gathering the documents into my leather portfolio. Not yet. I need to handle this personally first. That evening, my phone lit up with a family group text. Marcus had called an emergency family meeting at Mom's house. Important discussion about Mom's medical bills. Everyone needs to be there. 7 p.m. I arrived exactly on time, parking my Tesla behind Marcus's new Ford F-150 Limited, a $75,000 truck he'd bought in April. Funny timing, that. The living room was packed. Mom sat in her favorite recliner, looking frailer than I remembered. Marcus and his wife Katie occupied the couch, while our sister Amanda perched on the armrest. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Pete had even driven in from Houston. Finally, Marcus said as I walked in, his tone dripping with fake concern. We need to talk about Mom's medical bills. The hospital's threatening to stop treatment. I set my laptop bag down carefully. Yes, let's talk about that. Look, he continued, standing up for maximum dramatic effect. We all know you make the most money. The rest of us have been scraping by, doing what we can. But Mom needs help, and you've done nothing. Amanda nodded vigorously. All those promises about sending money, and nothing ever came through. Stop lying about the $75,000, Marcus suddenly yelled, pointing at me. We're tired of your excuses. The room erupted in practiced outrage. Katie wiped fake tears. Aunt Sarah muttered about big city selfishness. Uncle Pete shook his head disapprovingly. I looked at Mom, who seemed confused and overwhelmed. She'd always hated conflict, always believed the best in people, especially her children. Without saying a word, I took out my laptop and the HDMI cable I'd brought. Their smug expressions faltered slightly as I connected it to the large TV mounted on the wall. What are you doing? Marcus demanded, a slight tremor in his voice. I straightened up, smoothing my blazer. Since everyone's so interested in the truth about the money, I thought we could watch a little video together. We don't need, Marcus started, but I cut him off. Actually, we do. I opened the security footage file. First National Bank sends their regards, by the way. They were very helpful this morning. The color drained from Marcus's face as the first frame appeared on screen. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes before pressing play. Let's all watch together, shall we? Their smiles disappeared. The security footage played in crystal clear quality on Mom's 65-inch TV. Every detail was visible. Marcus's navy blue suit, the brown leather briefcase I'd given him for Christmas, even the way he nervously adjusted his tie before approaching the teller. That's quite a nice suit, I commented casually. Bought it in March, didn't you? Marcus remained frozen, his mouth slightly open. Katie had stopped fake crying, her hands gripping the couch cushions. The footage continued. Marcus presenting the forged power of attorney. The teller processing the transaction. The timestamp matching exactly when he texted me. At the hospital with Mom. Starting new treatment today. Turn it off, he whispered. Why? We're just getting to the interesting part. I pulled out the transaction records. Like how you deposited the cashier's check into a new account at Pacific West. Or how that money was withdrawn in 4 large transactions over the next month. Amanda stood up, her face flushed. This doesn't prove anything. He was handling Mom's care. $32,000 to Thompson Motors on April 3rd, I read from the statement. For a down payment on that shiny new truck outside. Another $28,000 to Diamonds Direct on April 15th. I turned to Katie, who was now staring at her enormous engagement ring. Congratulations on the upgrade, by the way. Mom's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. Marcus, what did you do? The remaining funds, I continued, my voice steady, were split between Nordstrom, Four Seasons hotels, and an interesting series of transfers to a cryptocurrency exchange. Uncle Pete, who'd been so quick to judge earlier, suddenly found the carpet fascinating. Aunt Sarah's righteous indignation had evaporated. I walked over to Mom's recliner and knelt beside her. I'm so sorry, Mom. I thought the money was going to your treatment. I should have verified directly with the hospital. You can't prove any of this, Marcus burst out, desperation creeping into his voice. That power of attorney was legal. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out another document. I spoke with your friend David at Legal Quick today. You know, the notary? He was very cooperative when I mentioned potential fraud charges. Apparently, he never actually witnessed any signing. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's face had gone from red to gray. He also mentioned something interesting about a pattern of document falsification. Something about Dad's will last year. I watched realization dawn on Amanda's face. We should probably discuss that too, since you both seemed so concerned about financial transparency. Now wait a minute. Uncle Pete finally spoke up. Let's not get carried away. I'm sure Marcus meant to repay the $43,000 you borrowed from him in May. I asked innocently. From Mom's medical fund? Yes, we should definitely discuss that too. I opened another folder on my laptop. Bank statements, credit card bills, and transfer records appeared in neat columns. 6 months of systematic theft, laid bare in black and white. I've spent the day collecting quite a lot of documentation, I explained, my analyst's precision showing through. Would anyone like to see their personal transaction history? I have them organized alphabetically. Katie suddenly stood up, her designer handbag clutched to her chest. I didn't know, she blurted out. Marcus told me it was his investment money. Investment money? Mom's voice was barely audible. While I couldn't afford my medication. Marcus turned on Katie. Shut up. You loved spending it on that trip to Cabo, which was charged to a new credit card opened in Mom's name. I added, pulling up another statement, along with about $23,000 in other purchases. Amanda began edging toward the door. I smiled at her. Leaving so soon? But we haven't discussed the mysterious payments to your business account yet. I trusted you, Mom whispered, looking at Marcus. I couldn't understand why the hospital kept saying nothing had been paid. I placed my hand over hers, feeling her trembling. Don't worry, Mom. I've already spoken with the hospital's billing department. Your treatment is covered going forward. I looked directly at Marcus. They were very interested in the insurance fraud attempt too. Insurance fraud? Aunt Sarah's voice cracked. Oh yes, I replied, clicking to another document. Someone submitted claims for treatments that never happened. The insurance company's investigation unit is very thorough. Marcus collapsed back onto the couch, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume he borrowed. So, I said, standing up and straightening my blazer again, should we discuss repayment terms? Or should we let the bank's fraud department handle this directly? The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hold its breath. I checked my watch, a Cartier I'd bought with my own money. I'll give you all exactly 1 hour to decide. No one moved for what felt like minutes. The security footage had stopped playing, frozen on a frame of Marcus counting the cashier's check with trembling fingers. 1 hour? Marcus finally managed, his voice cracking. You can't be serious. Actually, I pulled out a formal-looking document from my portfolio. I'm being quite generous. The bank's fraud department suggested immediate action. Mom struggled to sit up straighter in her recliner. I want to know everything. No more lies. I nodded, then turned to face my siblings. Who wants to go first? Marcus? Amanda? Or should I start with the credit card statements? Amanda burst into tears. Real ones this time. He said if I didn't help, he'd tell everyone about the money I took from Dad's estate. Shut up, Marcus shouted, jumping to his feet. No, you shut up. Amanda's composure shattered completely. You promised this would fix everything. Now look what's happened. I held up my hand. Dad's estate? The one that was supposedly depleted by medical bills. Katie let out a strange laugh. Oh my God, there's more. There's always more, I said quietly, pulling up another file on my laptop. Like the second mortgage taken out on Mom's house 3 months ago. Does anyone want to explain that? The room went completely still. Mom's face had turned ashen. What second mortgage? Marcus made a move toward the door, but I stepped in his way. Running won't help. The documents are already with my lawyer. Your lawyer? Uncle Pete sputtered. Sullivan and Hayes, I replied. They specialize in financial fraud and elder abuse cases. They're very thorough. Aunt Sarah started gathering her purse and coat. We should go, Pete. This is family business. Sit down, I commanded, my voice sharp enough to make her freeze. Your $43,000 loan makes you part of this family business. I walked over to Mom's side again, taking her trembling hand. I'm so sorry, but you need to hear all of it. The cancer treatments weren't the only thing they've been hiding. Over the next 20 minutes, I methodically laid out everything I'd discovered during my day of investigation. The forged power of attorney hadn't just been used for my $75,000. They'd systematically drained Mom's accounts, taken loans in her name, and even tried to refinance her fully paid house. The house? Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. My home. Marcus finally broke. The investment was guaranteed. The crypto returns were supposed to be 300%. I was going to pay everything back double. Like you paid back the $140,000 from Dad's life insurance. I asked quietly. The money that mysteriously vanished last year. Amanda gasped. You said that went to Mom's medical trust. There is no medical trust, I said, pulling up more documents. Just a series of transfers to accounts I've spent all day tracing. Vacations, gambling debts, a boat that was sold 2 months after purchase. Katie stood up suddenly. I want immunity. Everyone turned to stare at her. If I show you everything, tell you where all the money went, I want immunity from prosecution. Her voice was steady now. All pretense gone. Marcus forged my signature too. I have proof. Marcus lunged at her. You backstabbing. I stepped between them, my voice cold. Touch her, and I call the police right now. Your choice. He backed down, sweat visible through his expensive shirt. 40 minutes left, I announced, checking my watch again. Here are your options. First, you sign everything I have prepared admitting to the fraud. You agree to full repayment terms, including 8% interest. You surrender all assets purchased with stolen funds, and you agree to detailed financial monitoring. Or, Uncle Pete asked weakly, or I make one phone call and the bank's fraud department takes over. They've already flagged the transactions. All they need is my go-ahead to involve the FBI. The FBI. Amanda's voice rose to a squeak. Wire fraud across state lines, I explained calmly. Plus insurance fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. The minimum sentence is quite interesting. Mom's grip on my hand tightened. How much? She whispered. How much did they take in total? I hesitated, then decided she deserved the full truth, including my $75,000, Dad's insurance, the second mortgage, and all the credit cards. I paused. Just over $380,000. The number hung in the air like poison gas. Mom closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. But don't worry, I added, my voice hardening. They're going to pay back every single penny, aren't you? Marcus slumped against the wall, his expensive suit wrinkled and damp with sweat. Amanda had curled into herself, making small whimpering sounds. Uncle Pete and Aunt Sarah sat frozen, their faces ashen. I pulled out a stack of documents from my briefcase. Now, who would like to sign first? Katie stepped forward immediately. I have screenshots of everything. Text messages, emails, bank transfers. I've been keeping records since March. Marcus stared at his wife in shock. You were documenting. Of course I was, she snapped. I learned from the best, didn't I? Now shut up and let me save myself. I laid the papers on the coffee table, my Mont Blanc pen gleaming in the lamplight. 30 minutes left. Time to decide. The repayment agreement ended up being 23 pages long. I watched as each of them signed, their signatures shaky but legible. Katie went first, providing a USB drive containing what she called insurance against Marcus. Amanda followed, mascara streaked down her face. Uncle Pete and Aunt Sarah signed the separate agreement for their $43,000 loan, avoiding everyone's eyes. Marcus was last. His hand trembled so badly he could barely hold the pen. Initial each page, I instructed coldly. And don't forget the asset surrender form. The terms were brutally simple. Every asset purchased with stolen funds would be liquidated immediately. Their bank accounts would be monitored by an independent trustee. Monthly payments would be automatically deducted from any income. Any deviation would trigger immediate legal action. The truck keys, I said, holding out my hand to Marcus. I need it for work. Keys. Now. He dropped them in my palm, the designer key fob catching the light. I turned to Katie. The ring, too. She slipped off the 3-carat diamond, probably relieved to be rid of it. I placed both items in an evidence bag, adding it to my documentation. I've scheduled an appointment with the district attorney for Monday, I announced, gathering the signed papers. Your cooperation tonight has been noted. Whether charges are filed will depend on complete compliance with these agreements. You'd send your own brother to jail? Marcus whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not my little brother but the stranger he'd become. You stole from our dying mother? I replied. What do you think? Mom hadn't spoken during the signing. She sat in her recliner, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I knelt beside her again. The house is safe, I assured her softly. I've already started proceedings to void the fraudulent mortgage. Your medical care is fully covered. I've transferred another $100,000 to a secure account that only you and I can access. She gripped my hand. I should have known. When they kept making excuses about the hospital bills. It's not your fault, I said firmly, but things will be different now. I stood up, addressing the room. The monitoring starts tomorrow. Katie, you'll meet with my lawyer at 9 a.m. to provide your evidence. Amanda, Your business accounts will be audited next week. Uncle Pete, Aunt Sarah, expect calls from the trustee about your repayment schedule. And me? Marcus asked quietly. You have until Monday to provide a complete accounting of every dollar you stole. Any discrepancy between your story and Katie's evidence will go straight to the DA. He nodded, defeated. Now get out, I said. All of you. They filed out silently, leaving their house keys on the table by Mom's order. I watched through the window as they got into their respective vehicles, except Marcus, whose truck would be sold the next day. Once they were gone, I called the private nursing service I'd arranged. Within an hour, a competent-looking woman named Susan arrived, carrying overnight bags. I've hired 24-hour care, I explained to Mom. Susan will stay tonight, and her colleague Maria comes tomorrow. They'll help with medications, appointments, and anything else you need. You're not staying? Mom asked, looking worried. I'll be back tomorrow, I promised. But first, I have some more work to do. That work took another week. I took a leave of absence from Goldman Sachs, using my considerable resources and connections to untangle the web of fraud. The district attorney was very interested in the evidence, especially after I mentioned potential connections to other investment scams. Katie's documentation proved invaluable. She'd been planning her exit for months, recording conversations, photographing documents, tracking every dollar. In exchange for immunity, she filed for divorce and provided testimony that would ensure Marcus never came near financial management again. The fallout was extensive. Amanda's business shut down after the audit revealed years of tax evasion. Uncle Pete and Aunt Sarah had to sell their vacation home to repay their portion. Marcus faced potential criminal charges, pending his cooperation with the investigation. But more importantly, Mom's care was finally properly managed. The new treatment protocol showed promising results. The nursing service kept her comfortable, and her doctors reported improvement in her condition. I bought the house next door to Mom's, converting it into a home office. Goldman Sachs agreed to let me work remotely 3 days a week. The other days, I worked from Mom's kitchen table, monitoring both her care and the repayment progress. One evening, about a month after the confrontation, Mom and I sat on her porch, watching the sunset. I should have seen it, she said quietly. The signs were all there. They took advantage of your trust, I replied, but they'll never do it again. She smiled slightly. My practical daughter, always fixing things. Some things need to be broken before they can be fixed properly, I said, thinking of the family we'd lost and the stronger boundaries we'd gained. My phone buzzed. An email from the trustee confirming the first round of repayments had been processed. The truck had sold for $68,000. Katie's ring brought another $42,000. Small steps toward justice. What happens now? Mom asked. I took her hand, feeling the strength returning to her grip. Now we rebuild. The right way this time. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of redemption. Sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the clearest vision. We'd lost a family built on lies, but we'd gained something more valuable: truth, boundaries, and a foundation strong enough to support whatever came next. I looked at Mom and smiled. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in months, I absolutely meant it. The intervention was my mother's idea. She'd orchestrated it perfectly. Sunday brunch at our family estate. Everyone dressed in their concern, appropriate best. I could smell the expensive coffee and judgment as soon as I walked in. Alexander, darling. Mom adjusted her Cartier bracelet. We're all here because we care. The all included my older brother Michael in his custom Tom Ford suit, my father pretending to read the Wall Street Journal while stealing glances at his Patek Philippe watch, and my sister-in-law Diana, who'd never worked a day in her life, but had strong opinions about proper career choices. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Slightly worn jeans, a simple sweater from Target, scuffed boots. Let them think I couldn't afford better. It made what was coming so much sweeter. We've been watching your attempts at running a business, Michael began, setting down his third cup of imported coffee. The small office in that questionable part of downtown. The late hours. It's clearly not working. Diana nodded sympathetically, diamonds catching the morning light. There's no shame in admitting defeat. Michael's firm is always hiring junior analysts. I sipped my coffee quietly, thinking about the real office, the one they didn't know about. 40 stories up in the glass tower downtown, overlooking the city I was quietly reshaping. Your father and I, Mom continued, we hate seeing you struggle. Living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. When you could be living properly, Michael interrupted. Like us. By properly, he meant the mansion he'd mortgaged to the hilt, the cars he leased to impress clients, the lifestyle that was 90% smoke and mirrors. I knew his real financial situation. I knew everyone's. We took the liberty, Dad finally spoke, sliding a folder across the marble dining table, of having Michael's firm analyze your company's prospects. I opened it, scanning numbers I already knew were wrong. They'd only found the surface company, the small consulting front I'd maintained for exactly this purpose. The market analysis suggests bankruptcy within 6 months, Michael said, clearly enjoying himself. But if you let me step in now, maybe we can salvage something. Salvage, I repeated softly, remembering his words from 3 years ago when he tried to steal my initial investors. When he told everyone I was playing at business. It's time to be realistic, Mom pressed. You're not cut out for. Michael's phone chimed. He glanced at it dismissively, then froze. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the imported tiles. What's wrong? Diana grabbed his phone, then gasped. That's impossible. What? Mom demanded. Michael's voice shook. Why is Alexandra's company valued at $4 billion on Bloomberg? The room fell silent. I pulled out my own phone, opening the article I'd known was coming. Tech innovator Alexandra Bennett emerges as industry giant. Neurotech solutions valued at $4 billion after stealth mode exit. There must be a mistake. Dad reached for the phone. Some other Alexandra. No mistake, I said quietly, reaching into my bag. Though the valuation's a bit off, we're closer to $5.2 billion after this morning's private equity round. I placed my business card on the table, not the simple consulting one they knew. The real one, embossed CEO title, downtown office address, the company logo they were now seeing splashed across financial news worldwide. But your little office, Mom stammered. A front, I explained, useful for keeping competitors and nosy family members from seeing what I was really building. Building what? Michael demanded, scrolling frantically through the Bloomberg article. This says something about artificial intelligence and neural networks. The next generation of machine learning. I confirmed. Patents pending in 42 countries. Google tried to buy us last month for $3 billion. We declined. Diana's perfectly contoured face had gone pale. All this time, I continued. While you were mocking my struggling business, I was raising 9 figures in venture capital. While you pitied my old car, I was hiring the best engineers in the country. And while you planned this little intervention, I was closing deals with 3 Fortune 10 companies. Dad's hands shook as he read the article. Private investors, major technological breakthrough, revolutionary applications in healthcare and finance. The apartment you felt sorry for me living in. I smiled slightly. I own the building, just like I own the questionable office building downtown. Real estate's a good investment when you know where the tech sector is expanding. Michael stood abruptly. You can't have. I would have known. Would you? I raised an eyebrow. Like you knew your firm was about to lose its biggest client. He paled. What? Oh, did I forget to mention? I checked my watch. Your managing partner is probably reading the email right now. Neurotech Solutions is terminating all contracts with Bennett Financial, effective immediately. The sound of breaking china made us all turn. Mom had dropped her favorite teacup, hands pressed to her mouth as another Bloomberg alert flashed across Michael's phone. Neurotech CEO Alexander Bennett named to Forbes 40 under 40, the stealth billionaire who revolutionized AI. Billionaire? Diana whispered. I stood, straightening my Target sweater. We should probably discuss how this changes the family dynamic, but not today. I picked up my worn leather bag, actually handcrafted Italian, worth more than Michael's car. I have a board meeting to prepare for. The room remained frozen as I walked to the door. Just before leaving, I turned back. Oh, and Michael? About that junior analyst position. I think I'll pass. Their stunned silence followed me out into the morning sun, where my driver waited with the car I actually drove to important meetings. A perfect Sunday brunch, indeed. The next 48 hours were exactly what I'd predicted. The financial world exploded with speculation about the stealth billionaire who'd built an AI empire in secret. My phone filled with messages from family members who'd suddenly remembered our deep connection. Aunt Catherine, darling, always knew you were special. Cousin Peter, remember when we shared crayons in kindergarten? Uncle James, let's discuss investment opportunities. I sat in my actual office, 40 stories above the city, reviewing their desperate attempts at reconciliation with my chief of staff, Sarah. Your brothers tried to get past security 6 times today, she reported, sliding a stack of contracts across my desk. His wife called pretending to be from Goldman Sachs. I smiled, signing the documents. And my parents. Your mother's been calling every society magazine in the country, claiming she was your earliest supporter and mentor. Sarah checked her tablet. Your father's parked outside in his Mercedes for 3 hours. Has he figured out I own this building yet? No. He thinks you're just renting the penthouse office. Should I enlighten him? I glanced at the security feed, showing my father's car. Not yet. Let's see how long he sits there. My phone buzzed with an alert. Michael had just walked into Bennett Financial's morning meeting. Perfect timing. I pulled up the live stream from their conference room, another system they didn't know I controlled. You should see this, I told Sarah. On screen, Michael strutted to the head of the table, clearly ready to damage control. But before he could speak, his managing partner stood up. Would anyone care to explain? The partner held up his phone. Why our biggest client dropped us without warning? And why said client happens to be run by Michael's sister? The room erupted. Michael's face went from confident to panicked in seconds. Losing Neurotech means a 40% drop in annual revenue, the partner continued. and their new public profile would have doubled our fees. I can fix this, Michael stammered. Alexandra's just, she's playing games. I'll talk to her. Like you talked to her 3 years ago. A voice came from the door. Everyone turned to see James Chen, my head of strategic partnerships, walking in. When you tried to steal her initial investors. Michael's face went white. How did you? We have the emails, Michael. James placed a folder on the table. Your attempts to discredit her to venture capital firms. Your calls to potential clients warning them away. Very thorough paper trail. I watched Michael sink into his chair as James continued. Neurotech Solutions isn't just terminating contracts. We're filing formal complaints with the SEC about your firm's attempts at market manipulation. Sarah whistled softly. That's going to leave a mark. He earned it, I replied, thinking of all the times Michael had tried to sabotage my company's growth. Actions have consequences. My office door opened and Maya, my general counsel, entered with another stack of documents. Your parents' financial records, as requested. You were right. They're leveraged to the hilt. The estate, the cars, everything's mortgaged through Bennett Financial. Michael's been handling their investments, I noted, scanning the papers. Moving money around to hide the holes. Classic pyramid scheme, Maya confirmed. Using new client funds to cover family losses. If the SEC investigates his firm, they'd lose everything. I leaned back, watching my father still sitting in his car below, unless someone steps in to help. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously considering. Family's complicated, I interrupted, pulling up another file. But timing is everything. On my screen, another Bloomberg alert flashed. Neurotech Solutions announces new investment division. Industry veterans join leadership team. Right on cue, my phone rang. Mother's number. Darling. Her voice dripped honey and desperation. We simply must talk about this unfortunate misunderstanding. Your father and I are facing financial ruin if Michael's firm collapses. I finished. Which it will, once the SEC investigation starts. Silence. Then, how did you? I know everything, Mother. The mortgages, the loans, the shell games, Michael's been playing with your money. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Alexandra, please. For the first time in my life, I heard real fear in her voice. Be at my office tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring Dad and Michael. Leave Diana at home. This is family business. Your office? But we don't know where. Look up. I watched through my window as my father finally raised his head, seeing the Neurotech Solutions logo gleaming on the building he'd been parked beside for hours. 41st floor, I said. Don't be late. I ended the call and turned to my team. Maya, prepare the bailout paperwork, but with our conditions. Sarah, call the SEC. Tell them we found irregularities in Bennett Financial's records that we'd like to address privately first. And Michael's managing partner? Sarah asked. Let him sweat until tomorrow. Fear's a powerful motivator for cooperation. They left to execute the plan, leaving me alone looking out over the city. On my desk, the family photo from Sunday brunch sat next to the Bloomberg article announcing my company's emergence. The contrast between their pitying looks then and their panic now was striking. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding, on my terms this time. Tomorrow, I would offer them salvation. But first, they needed to understand exactly who they were dealing with. The quiet daughter they'd underestimated wasn't so quiet anymore. They arrived at 8:57 a.m. Mother in channel, father in his best crisis management suit, and Michael looking like he hadn't slept in days. My security team made them wait in the lobby for exactly 15 minutes before escorting them up. The elevator opened directly into my office suite, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. I'd arranged the seating carefully, them on the low couch, me at my desk on a slightly elevated platform. Power dynamics matter. Your company owns the whole building, father asked, trying to mask his shock with business casual interest. Among others, I replied, not looking up from my screen where I was watching Bennett Financial's stock price continue its downward spiral. Michael, your firm's lost 27% of its value since yesterday. Impressive. He shifted uncomfortably. The market's overreacting. Once I explain. Explain what? I turned my screen, showing internal emails from his firm. The unauthorized use of client funds, the misleading investment reports, or your personal offshore accounts. Mother gasped. Father's carefully maintained composure cracked. How did you? Michael started. 3 years ago, when you tried to sabotage my initial funding rounds, I hired the best forensic accountants in the business. They found everything. I pressed a button, and documents began appearing on the wall screens. Every hidden transaction, every falsified report, every client you've deceived. Alexandra, Mother cut in, surely we can discuss this as a family. Like you discussed my failing business as a family? I stood, walking to the windows. Or like Michael discussed my company with potential investors, telling them I was emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible? Father stepped forward. Whatever Michael did, your mother and I leveraged everything you own through his firm. I turned back to them. The estate's mortgaged 3 times over. Your art collection's being used as collateral for high-interest loans. Even Mom's precious jewelry is tied up in investment schemes. Mother's hand flew to her pearls. That's not possible. Show them, I said to the air. My AI system responded instantly, projecting detailed financial records onto every wall. Their entire financial house of cards, exposed in high-resolution glory. When the SEC investigation becomes public, I continued, you'll lose everything. The estate, the cars, the country club memberships, all gone. The Bennett name will become synonymous with fraud. Michael jumped up. You can't prove. Actually, a new voice interrupted. James Chen walked in, carrying a thick binder. We can prove all of it. Your sister's AI system has been tracking your firm's transactions for years. The evidence is comprehensive. Who is this? Father demanded. James Chen, head of strategic partnerships at Neurotech Solutions. He handed each of them a document. And these are your options. I watched them read, seeing the exact moment they understood their situation. Mother's hands trembled. Father's face went ashen. Michael looked like he might faint. Option 1, I explained. We submit everything to the SEC tomorrow. You face federal charges, asset seizure, and public humiliation. Option 2, James continued. You sign these papers now. Transfer all family assets to Neurotech's new investment division. We handle the SEC quietly, restructure the debt, and save what we can of the Bennett name. You want us to give you control of everything. Michael's voice cracked. I already have control, I corrected. I'm offering you a chance to keep some dignity. And maybe, I paused, learn how to build something legitimate for once. Mother looked up from the papers. These terms. We'd be working for you. You'd be working with my company, I clarified. Father's experience in client relations could be valuable, properly supervised. Mother's social connections might help our charitable foundation. And Michael, he flinched as I turned to him. You'll start in compliance. Learning banking regulations from the other side. Minimum wage, no benefits, for at least a year. This is revenge, he spat. No, I sat back at my desk. This is rehabilitation, and your only chance to avoid prison. Father stood slowly, decades of corporate negotiations visible in his stance. And if we sign, you'll protect the family name? I'll protect what's worth protecting, I replied, starting with the thousands of clients your son's firm has deceived. They get made whole first. Time-sensitive offer, James added. SEC's waiting for our call. Mother wiped a tear, careful not to smudge her makeup. Alexandra, when did you become so powerful, ruthless, successful? I smiled slightly. I always was. You just never bothered to see it. One by one, they signed. Michael last, his hand shaking so badly he could barely manage his signature. Welcome to Neurotech Solutions, I said as James collected the documents. Security will show you to HR for processing. Your new positions start tomorrow. They filed out quietly, broken aristocrats facing a new reality. But at the door, Mother turned back. That dinner, when we tried to intervene, you already knew everything then, didn't you? I knew everything years ago, I replied. I was just waiting for the right moment to show you. After they left, James stayed behind. That was almost merciful, considering what they did. Family's complicated, I said, watching their expensive cars being taken away by my security team. First step in asset recovery. Sometimes the best revenge is forcing people to become better than they were. My phone buzzed. Bloomberg wanted an exclusive on Neurotech's new investment division. Perfect timing, as always. Time to show the world what the quiet daughter could really do. 1 month later, I sat in my office reviewing the transformation. Bloomberg's headline said it all. Neurotech Solutions revolutionizes family office management. Traditional wealth meets AI innovation. The article didn't mention how my family was adjusting to their new reality. How Father, stripped of his executive titles, now worked in client relations, carefully supervised by my team. Or how Mother, her social calendar replaced by actual responsibilities, was learning to run a legitimate charitable foundation. And Michael? He sat in a tiny cubicle in compliance, reviewing banking regulations for minimum wage. A far cry from his corner office and inflated title. Your 3 p.m. is here, Sarah announced, interrupting my thoughts. I nodded, turning to face the wall of screens showing Neurotech's global operations. How's he doing? Third time this week he stayed late studying regulations. Actually seems to be trying. Interesting. I pulled up Michael's performance reports. His supervisor had noted genuine effort, despite the obvious humiliation of reporting to people he once would have dismissed. Send him in. Michael entered differently than he had a month ago. The designer suit was gone, replaced by off-the-rack business casual. His swagger had disappeared along with his American Express black card. Sit, I gestured to the chair across from me. How's compliance? Enlightening, he said carefully. I never realized how many regulations we were overlooking. Union violating? He flinched but nodded. Yes, the shortcuts I took, the rules I ignored. I'm seeing it all differently now. I studied him, remembering the brother who tried to destroy my company before it began. Your supervisor says you're showing promise. I'm trying to learn. He met my eyes for the first time in weeks. Really learn, not just fake it like before. My phone buzzed. Another alert about Bennett Financial. The SEC had quietly accepted our restructuring plan, avoiding public charges in exchange for full cooperation. The family name would survive, barely. Mom called, Michael said suddenly, from her new apartment. The downsizing had hit our mother hardest. Her beloved estate sold, her social status diminished, living in a modest condo paid for by her new foundation salary. How's she adjusting? She actually, he smiled slightly, talked about the foundation's work. Real excitement, not just social climbing. Dad, too, he's connecting with clients honestly for once. And Diana? I asked, referring to his status-obsessed wife. Left last week. Couldn't handle the reduced circumstances. He shrugged. Another new gesture. Probably for the best. I pulled up another file on my screen. Michael's personal financial records. Your credit counseling sessions? Humiliating but necessary. He straightened in his chair. I've learned more about ethical finance in 4 weeks than in my entire career. Good. I stood, walking to the window, because I'm offering you a choice. He waited, tension visible in his shoulders. Continue in compliance, work your way up slowly, maybe make junior analyst in 5 years. I turned back to him, or join our new family office advisory division as a cautionary example. What? We're teaching other family offices how to transition to modern, ethical wealth management, I explained. Your story, the fraud, the downfall, the lessons learned, could be valuable, if you're willing to own it. Understanding dawned on his face. You want me to admit everything, publicly? To select clients. Show them what happens when old-school family money meets modern regulatory scrutiny. I sat on the edge of my desk. Help other families avoid our mistakes. He was quiet for a long moment. The Michael from 2 months ago would have rejected the idea instantly, too proud to admit failure. But that Michael was gone. When do I start? I smiled, genuinely this time. Training begins next week. Same salary, but with potential for growth, based on genuine performance, not family connections. Why? He asked. After what I did to you, why offer this chance? Because you're learning, I replied. And because sometimes family deserves a second chance. Just one, though. He nodded, understanding the warning beneath the opportunity. One more thing. I pressed a button, and the screens filled with new data. Neurotech's AI has identified similar fraud patterns in 12 other family offices. The SEC's very interested. You're going after all of them. We're offering them the same choice we gave you: modernize or face extinction. I handed him a folder. Your first assignment. Review these cases. Identify the patterns you recognize from your own experience. He took the folder with newfound respect. The quiet sister who watched and learned became the one who changed everything. I finished. Don't forget it. After he left, Sarah brought in the latest market reports. Neurotech's stock had doubled again. Our AI systems were revolutionizing not just technology, but how generational wealth adapted to modern scrutiny. My phone buzzed with a message from Mother. The Foundation's education initiative helped 50 students today. Really helped them, not just for show. Thank you for showing me a better way. I saved the message. A small validation that some lessons were finally being learned. On my screen, the global map of Neurotech's operations pulsed with activity. Each light represented change, innovation, progress. The quiet daughter had built something revolutionary, something that would reshape not just her family's legacy, but the entire landscape of wealth and power. And yes, I was just getting started. But this time, I wasn't starting alone. I was bringing everyone else into the future, whether they were ready or not.